Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you're watching first part of What If Naruto Found Legendary Sword of Heroes. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Unknown place in the tranquility of nature that had seized them centuries before, the ancient ruins of the ancestors lay silent. To animals, it was sacred ground, and to humans, it was a pointless place, but to the two who approached it, it was just a road. The older of the two, a gray-haired man with long robes and some face paint under his eyes, ignored it and continued to walk as they entered the clearing. The other was a 13-year-old boy with blonde hair who was wearing an orange jumpsuit with blue stripes and was supposed to follow but stopped abruptly when he came to a particular ruin. "Is something wrong, Naruto?" the older man asked, curious as to why his apprentice had stopped. After a few moments of staring at the ruin, the boy who is now Naruto asked, "Have we been here before, Senin?" When Jiraiya said, "No, and I thought I told you to stop calling me that," she growled. "The Gamma?" Senin asked inquisitively, "Why?" Naruto walked up the ruin that looked like a door and said, "I just got a bad case of deja vu," shaking his head slightly. Jiraiya said, "Naruto?" As Naruto opened the door and a yellow, concentrated light came through, but it wasn't any light coming from behind the door. "What the hell is that?" Jiraiya asked. After passing through, Naruto was in a spacious room with a carpet that led to an altar farther on. He approached it as though he were walking on autopilot, Jiraiya following closely behind, though he was having trouble believing they were in an invisible structure. He looked at the architecture and discovered that it was unlike anything he had ever seen, indicating that it was at least 1,000 years old. Despite this, it appeared to be in perfect condition, as though it had not been damaged by time. Though he did it unconsciously, the blonde-haired teenager muttered, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," with his hands in a seal. At his side, a lone clone hanged into a tiny blue instrument that Jiraiya recognized as an ocarina, which had a triad symbol on it. He saw the same triad symbol above a huge door that blocked the way, half the size of Konoha's gate. "The Gamma?" Senin questioned. "Naruto? What is this place? Have you been here before?" "I don't know what's going on, but I can hear it. It's calling me," the blonde teenager said, shaking his head. Taking the hanged ocarina, he stood in front of the altar and spoke softly. "Here it goes," he said, bringing it to his lips and playing it. One of the most exquisite songs Jiraiya had ever heard was played. "Why does this seem so familiar?" he asked as the enormous door slowly opened and he halted his performance to ascend the stairs on either side of the altar. After the song had ended and his pupil had already moved on to the next room, Jiraiya yelled, "Naruto!" and caught himself. He followed and approached the boy, asking, "What is going on? How did you play like that?" Naruto was not listening, instead gazing at the middle of the slightly elevated platform in front of them. "What are you looking at?" Jiraiya trailed off when he noticed the object embedded directly in a pedestal. "What is that?" he asked. Subconsciously, Naruto muttered, "The Master Sword," as he advanced slowly. Since this was so unusual, Jiraiya watched him unsure of what to do. He wasn't sure whether to stop his student from doing anything because it might be dangerous or to let him go and hope for the best as he watched him approach the blade. Note: based on his Rasengan throws, I understand Naruto to be right-handed. "Naruto, I'm not sure if this is a good idea. Here goes nothing," was the last thing he said as he watched the boy wrap his hands around the blade's hilt. Blue light burst from the 6 tablets on the floor as the sword came loose with a single, quick yank. It subsided after a short while, and Jiraiya turned to face his pupil, who had changed entirely. Dressed in a jumpsuit that was similar to his previous one but black with orange stripes and a long golden sheath strapped to his back, he was a little taller. "The Gamma?" Senin briefly thought he was his former pupil, but that thought was soon dispelled when he noticed Naruto's faint whisker lines. Note: imagine Naruto wearing a golden sheath strapped to his back, just like in part 2. To be sure, Jiraiya asked, "Naruto?" "It's me," the boy said, smiling and nodding. He raised the Master Sword to inspect it, grinned, then leaned back on one leg, flipped the sword in his hand, and placed it in its sheath on his back, LOZTP where Link sheaths his sword with the pose. He sighed in relief as it passed after briefly closing his eyes in agony. With concern, "The Gamma?" Senin inquired, "Are you alright?" He said, "Yeah, I don't know what happened but I feel like I've just been reunited with an old friend," as he glanced at the sword on his back over his shoulder. Jiraiya turned to face the door as the room's light faded, saying, "Okay, we'll figure it out later, but I want to get out of here now." "I'm glad to be out of there," Naruto said, nodding as he followed him as they made their way back through the door and emerged in the ruins. That is a nice sword. I don't think you'd find a better double-edged sword on this continent, he said, glancing at his pupil and examining the blade sheathed on his back. What's it called? The Gamma. Sennin asked, raising an eyebrow as he watched his pupil remove the blade's sheath. Master Sword, Naruto answered, extending the sword and making his way over to a nearby stone block. In one quick motion, he cut off the top half of the stone block. It's called the Master Sword, or at least that's what I think it's called, he said. How did I do that when I've never had any training with a blade? As the upper half slid away, Jiraiya pointed to the stone and said, no clue, but that was pretty good. Only veterans can do something like that. With a, I think I'll keep this from now on, expression, the teenager just stared at the sword as its edges appeared to glow blue like razors. The Gamma. Sennin was at a loss for what to do and had been troubled by something ever since he saw the blade on the pedestal. He was certain that he had heard of this Master Sword before, but he couldn't recall where. He squinted as he watched Naruto use the blade in some incredibly deft and balanced maneuvers. Jiraiya told him to put the sword away after he came to the conclusion, that sword. I've seen it before somewhere. Naruto. There's something you should know, I know who your parents are. So a hero has arisen once again, said the great beast, opening one of its crimson-slit eyes in the dark of a drab cage. The ancient power has no doubt been awakened and is awaiting its completion, he said, smiling as his eye closed again. Let's see if this world is worth saving again, he said, slowly getting up and approaching the cage while still smiling. Lightning Land. Reorganization's office, Kumo. Knock, knock. A voice on the other side of the door yelled, come in. Ah, Yugito. Chan. Please do come in, said the young adolescent girl as she walked in, shutting the door behind her. You wanted to see me, grandfather? She sighed as she took a seat at one of the chairs in front of the desk. Yes, it's your birthday today, correct? The Reorganization was an elderly man who could be quite emotional at times, but she thought it was a little odd that he would ask such a question. Yes, grandfather. Today is the day my mother died giving birth to me and my father died sealing away Nibi no Nekomata when all of the Biju that hadn't already been sealed away went on a rampage 13 years ago. The Kumo jounin was somewhat perplexed. Why did you ask? It's a family heirloom I got from my mother before she passed away. 13 years ago your father made me promise to give you this when I thought you were ready, the Reorganization said, letting out a sigh and removing his hat before raising his head to meet her eyes. It's yours now, he said, removing a tiny golden necklace from the Reorganization hat that she didn't recognize. She gazed at the tiny piece of jewelry, which seemed to sparkle in the window light, with wide eyes as he handed it to her. Here, let me, he said, carefully removing it from her and tying it around her neck. Yugito grinned and said, it's beautiful, while examining the necklace. The words, thank you grandfather, appeared at the end of a tiny golden triangle that seemed to be radiating warmth. He grinned before hearing the words, come in, ring on the door once more. Sorry to disturb you, my lord, but the elders are requesting to see you, said a Kumo Chunin, who had just entered the room. Tell them I'll be there shortly, he replied with a sigh and a nod. I should have given this job to your father a long time ago, the Chunin said, nodding before shutting the door. It's okay grandfather, I'll take that title away from you instead, so just hold onto it a bit longer, okay? Yugito said with a gentle giggle and a smile. He grinned and nodded before making his way to the door, saying, I'll see you later because I have a meeting to attend. Say hi to Uncle Kira for me, he said, waving at her as he left the room. She grinned back at him before making a shunshin to leave the office and head out into the street below. She pondered, I think I'll get some ramen, then nodded and hurried to her favorite ramen stand. One of the guards signaled to Naruto and Jiraiya to halt. State your name and business in this village, as they entered the village through the northern gates at that precise moment. Jiraiya of the Sanin. We're just passing through here and then moving south towards Kusa, the Gamma, Sennin said, presenting him with their documents. Examining the documents, the Chunin guard remarked, a Konoha nin? We aren't exactly on friendly terms, so I'm not sure I can let you in. I'll contact my superiors and we'll have some Anbu tailing you as per protocol. Move along, he said as he ushered them inside after returning the documents. As they walked, the boy with the blonde hair put his hands behind his head and said, Geez, I hate it when we enter a village and have to be constantly watched. You should count your blessings, kid. Konoha's Hyuga Anbus watch the foreign ninja that enter the village everywhere they go, including the bathroom. Jiraiya was trembling. You'd be surprised how often they use it outside of the battlefield. Well, the Hyuga women I don't mind because they usually end up with blood dripping down noses, but the guys freak me out when I walk by, said Naruto, smiling and shaking his head. Jiraiya laughed. What about the Hyuga heiress? She's got a crush on you in case you don't know. I noticed, but do you really think the Hyuga council or the village in general would approve? Naruto didn't say anything, though she does always blush when I walk by. It's always the quiet ones. Thank the gods they have ramen, he said, twitching his nose and shaking his head to the side. Catch up with you later, Arrow. Sennin, he called over his shoulder as he ran in the direction of the odor. He growled, Naruto. But the boy had already left. I swear he's addicted to that stuff, he said, referring to him and his ramen. Following the aroma of his favorite dish, the Konoha genin found a local stand that resembled a yellow version of Ichiraku's from back home. He smiled when he saw that he had enough money for a full meal, and more, after checking his gamma. Chan. A girl about his age, dressed in dark purple and sporting a Kumo hite, was already present at the stand. Additionally, he could smell that she was on her 5th bowl of miso ramen. How can I help you, sir? The chef asked, looking up at him from one of the seats next to her. He said, please give me a bowl of miso ramen, and the chef nodded before starting to prepare. What's a Konoha ninja doing in Kumo? The girl next to him asked after giving him a quick glance before carrying on with her meal. The words, just stopping by on my way to Kusa, came to mind as he shook his head at her. Another one, please, old man, she yelled at the chef after gobbling up the remainder of the bowl. With a, coming right up milady, the chef responded. What's your name, kid? She asked, turning back to the Konoha genin and giving him a sidelong glance. He shot back, don't call me kid and we're the same age, which made her smile. Besides, it's customary to give your name before asking for others. Before preparing to cook further, the chef returns and places both ramen bowls in front of the two. Okay, I'm ni Yugito, he says. She hardly noticed that he was saying, Enuzumaki Naruto, but she thought it was a little strange that he would only say his initial instead of his last name. Anyway, why did you stop by this stand? She asked, not intending to respond. He tasted the food he hadn't eaten in more than a month, and his eyes took on a dreamy expression. I smelt ramen, he said. I haven't eaten it in over a month. You like ramen too? She asked, merely gazing at him and the bowl. When she finished the bowl, he said, are you kidding? If I had the money I'd hire my own ramen cook, and placed an order for another. She continued to stare and thought she might have seen a picture of a boy of the same age wearing a green tunic superimposed on his body. Why does he seem so familiar? She asked herself. When she noticed the sword, she briefly stopped eating and questioned, what's with the sword? Are you trying to play hero or something? I'll have you know I like this sword, he said, giving her a sarcastic glare. Sure, whatever hero, she said with a light laugh, sarcasm evident in every word. When Jiraiya appeared inside the stand after hours had passed and it was growing dark, he said, hey Naruto, come on, I've pulled some strings and got us a place to sleep for tonight. A sigh of, alright, was made by the genin after the two had glanced up at the boy's sensei. I'll catch you later, lady, he said with a smile as he turned to face the girl he was sitting next to. Staring at the young jonin, the Gamma, Sennin said, hey, aren't you the granddaughter of the current Hokage, Yugito, right? Your sensei is Jiraiya of the Sannin? You really want to play hero, don't you, kid? Yugito asked Naruto after turning to face the man. Oh, shut up, princess, he said, giving her another sarcastic glare. Don't call me that. I get enough of that from the villagers, she snarled at him. He waved his hand dismissively and left the stand after saying, bye, to Jiraiya. Naruto asked, how the fuck did you get us a night in this place? As they soon arrived at the entrance of a large mansion. Jiraiya simply sighed, I handed the Hokage my newest edition of Icha Icha Paradise, which isn't supposed to be released for another 6 months. The blonde genin questioned, wait a minute, this place was chosen by the Hokage? Actually, it's his house, the Gamma, Sennin said, nodding with a pervert smile. That means that this is the princess's place too, Naruto said, turning to face the gate as he went pale. No, the same Kumo jonin turned the corner and went through the gates as soon as he finished speaking. The two were waiting to enter when she looked up at her door. She questioned, what are you two doing here? Jiraiya replied plainly, your grandfather was gracious enough to give us an opportunity to spend the night here. She gave the two a narrowed look, then shook her head and walked away. Before she opened the door, her hand briefly glowed when she touched the doorknob. Naruto saw the image of her wearing a light purple and pink dress cover her form just before she entered. He wanted to stand between her and his sensei, so he shook himself and went through afterwards. She indicated a set of stairs in front of them, and they began to move in their direction. There are seals all over the house which prevent the use of chakra other than my own and my grandfather's on the premises. Both of you can take the guest rooms upstairs on the right, she said. After climbing the stairs, they went to a room and quickly unpacked each other. Naruto then collapsed on the bed and gazed at the ceiling. He reached for his sheathed sword, which was resting next to him, and raised it to examine it. It appears my life is about to get a lot more interesting. Lightning Land. Raikage's mansion in Kumo. Later that evening, Naruto sprang to his feet when he heard a scream reverberating throughout the mansion. He leapt out of bed and grabbed his new sword when he heard a loud crash coming down the hallway. He turned and ran toward the source of the 3 loud bangs that reverberated through the hallway. When he reached Yugito's bedroom, which had its door open, he stopped. When he looked inside, he saw Yugito sitting against the wall, her shoulder bleeding, but she seemed to be using medical jutsu to heal it. 3 hooded figures with wolf and moon images emblazoned on their backs were standing in front of her, clad in long red cloaks. Additionally, though he was unsure of the meaning, he saw that their veins were visible through their cloaks and appeared to be glowing with blue blood. Scream all you want, demon. No one is here to save you. Raikage. Sama is at the office doing paperwork. Any last words, demon? A man asked, laughing and pointing a tiny weapon that resembled a tube at the jounin's head. She spat, "Go to hell," at him. One of the 3 men in the room picked her up and threw her on the bed, saying, "Hey boss. I've got an idea. Why don't we have some fun with her before we kill her? You know that's not a bad idea. Demons are supposed to have a lot of stamina. Now don't resist. I'd like to enjoy this," said the man with the weapon as the other 2 seized the girl's arms and held her down. "Sorry, that's not going to happen," Naruto said from behind him, the master sword piercing the man's back, as he gasped in agony and looked down at the sword sticking out of his chest. "Let go of her," he said, drawing the sword and letting the man's body fall before he began to move more quickly than anyone could see. "Who are you?" The person securing Yugito with her right arm was unable to complete the sentence before Naruto sliced him in 2 at the waist. Moments later, the final man released the Kumo jounin and leapt directly out of the open window. With her hand gripping her bleeding shoulder, Yugito retreated against the head of the bed and observed Naruto peering out the window through which the man had leapt. The Konoha genin continued to stare out of the window and said, "He's gone. I thought you said nobody could use chakra in this house other than you and the Raikage?" Applying one of her medical jutsu to stop the blood, she winced in pain and said, "That's right, but they didn't use any chakra. They're stealth masters. They're called blood howlers." "Blood howlers? Never heard of them," he said. She sighed as the last of her skin healed and she took out a tiny metal projectile. "They used to be a part of a Kumo Special Forces Anbu company," she said. Naruto looked over from his spot by the window and asked, "What's that?" "With a Western projectile called a bullet. It's like an arrow, just faster and smaller, that's launched from a gun." Response, she shook her head. "Are you all right?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah. Just give me a second," she said, swinging her legs over the side of the bed after grunting in agony. "Easy there," was Naruto's response when she attempted to stand but her legs failed. As he slung one of her arms over his shoulder and placed her back on the bed, she glanced up at him. "Something wrong?" she asked him, looking worried. "Nothing that can't wait," he said, shaking his head. "Come on, you're staying on the same side as Ero. Senin and me until your grandfather arrives," he said, nodding toward the door. He carried her out of the room toward the rooms that were assigned to him and Jiraiya after picking her up bridal style. Now that he thinks about it, Jiraiya wasn't there either, so he must have gone out, probably to do some late night peeking, because he wasn't there before he left. Upon arriving, he placed her on his bed and noticed that she had seemingly dozed off. At that moment, he became aware of the girl's attire, or lack thereof, noting that she was only wearing her nightgown, which seemed to have been ripped during her brief encounter with the blood howlers. He turned away, covered her with the bed's covers, then moved to the opposite side of the room and took a seat at the desk chair. He thought about the men who had attacked Yugito. The blood howlers, as she had called them. He was unsure of what it was, but he sensed something familiar about them, more precisely, the blue blood coursing through their veins. He muttered, "This is going to be a long night," in the silent room. Lightning Country. Southern Gate in Kumo is solemn. "Sorry for the hassle," said the elderly Raikage. "If I had known they were going to attack, I would have gotten my brother to guard her." As the gates opened, Jiraiya waved it away, saying, "No trouble really. She's your granddaughter, so of course she could have defended herself. Oh, and I'll make sure to send you a pre-released edition of my new book within the next week or so." "Thank you, Jiraiya." "Dono," the Reikage said with a bow. "That kid better hurry up," was his final words as he began to slowly leave, letting Naruto finish. Yugito shrugged when he said, "Make sure to stop by sometime, hero, more as an order than a request." He said bluntly, "No promises," and she struck him in the arm. She seemed to surprise him by looking up into his eyes for a moment before embracing him. Princess?" she asked. She said, "Thank you for saving me," and stepped back. Both of their right hands had black scars that looked like 3 triangles, but neither of them saw it. With a nervous laugh, he scratched the back of his head. He waved and said, "No problem, I'll catch you later," before turning to leave. "Well, how do you like your fiancé?" the elderly Reikage asked, grinning, after he had disappeared. "I thought you said my fiancé was a Hokage's son," she growled, shaking off the embarrassed look she had given him. "Why, yes I did, didn't I?" he asked, smiling and stroking his beard for a moment while gazing up at the sky. "Don't tell me he's the Yondaime's," she said, her eyes widening as she turned to face him after Naruto had left. "He's also a candidate for Rokudame Hokage," her grandfather said with a laugh and a nod. "The Valley of the End in the Fire. Rice Country border. To honor 2 of the most formidable fighters of the modern age, the Shodem Hokage and the founder of the Uchiha clan, 2 statues were erected at the side of the valley's waterfall. These 2 statues symbolize the final stabilization of the entire continent and the first defeat of Kyuubi no Kitsune, the 9-tailed king of demons. There aren't many people who visit it, in fact, there is only ever one." Perched atop the head of his statue, Uchiha Madara gazed out over the valley. An orange mask with a spiral around its single eyehole covered his face. His Sharingan flashed red, and he looked at his hand. His hand formed 3 triangles, with the top one glowing brighter than the others, as purple. Crimson energy glowed on the back. "So the power of the goddesses awakens from its slumber yet again," he said, clenching his fist in amusement. "Let's see if you can stand against me again, hero of leaves," he said as the sun briefly appeared over the horizon and he immediately disappeared into his own shadow. Fire Country. Getting closer to Konoha, Jiraiya saw his student, who had grown taller and seemed to have fully adapted to his black and orange jumpsuit, change over the years. But unlike before, he wore a red trench coat with black flames lining it and strapped the sheathed master sword to his side. Even though the boy's trench coat kept the sword largely hidden, he was still able to use it when necessary. The more he considered it, the more the Gamma Sennin saw his student's father superimposed on his body. The boy wore a red, black trench coat rather than a white, yellow one, but otherwise he resembled a younger Yondaime Hokage. The kanji for Konoha's Fox Flash was inscribed on his back, and his trench coat largely concealed the sword. He caught sight of it once more. Naruto vanished in what seemed like a burst of yellow before emerging atop a nearby branch. Jiraiya yelled, "Naruto! Come down here for a second," and the boy lowered himself. "How are you doing that?" Jiraiya asked. He appeared perplexed. "Doing what?" "Naruto, from my point of view it looks like you're teleporting like your father did when he used Hiraishin no Jutsu," said the Gamma Sennin. Naruto smiled and shook his head, saying, "Oh that? It's something I've been working on since my fight with Gaara 3 years ago. It happened when he went all Shukaku on me. I had to jump up and hit him with what little chakra I could muster from Kyuubi at the time. It worked, though he was able to catch me with his sand. I was able to move at the speed of light in a short burst which looked like a flash of red. I created this because I thought I could recreate its effects without Kyuubi's chakra," he added. "The downside is I can only travel in one direction per flash," he said, disappearing in a flash of yellow and resurfacing behind the Sennin, still smiling. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow and inquired, "Have you got a name for it?" Naruto proudly declared, "Shunpo no Jutsu," before disappearing once more. "Flash step technique, huh? You're way too much like your father. The only thing you lack is the pervertedness he and I had. Then again, maybe not if Yugito Hime's any indication," Jiraiya said with a lecherous smile as she glanced back in the direction they had come. Fire Country. Northern Gate, Konoha. The 2 on duty gate guards stared at the 2 for a few seconds as they strode through the gate. The 2 strode through, leaving the guards behind, and entered the village. They recognized Jiraiya of the Sannin right away, but they didn't recognize the other one because of the Konoha hite he was wearing and the fact that he was traveling with Jiraiya. "I guess there really isn't a place like home, huh, Ero? Sennin," Naruto said in a burst of yellow as he stood atop a nearby pole overlooking the village. "Not at all." Jiraiya leaned on the pole and smiled. "We should go see Tsunade." Naruto pointed to the 5 enormous stone heads carved into the cliff and said, "Speaking of her, Have you seen the Hokage monument? I feel so sorry for Dad right now. What did they use to carve her face? Her super strength? The Gamma, Sennin said in horror. Naruto laughed and said, probably, but he turned to look behind him at someone reading a well-known orange book while seated on a nearby rooftop. Hey Kakashi. Sensei. Long time no see. His former sensei waved to him. Hey Naruto, welcome back. He grinned and threw a small orange book to the one-eyed jounin, who caught it wide-eyed. Thanks, it's great to be back, he said. Arrow. Sennin told me to give that to you when I had the chance. He bowed to the blonde and said, you have my eternal gratitude, Naruto. Naruto. About Chunin exam 3 years ago, I am sorry for not training you and training Sasuke instead. The council forced me to train him alone when it was actually you I wanted to train for the Chunin exam finals, he said, sighing as he opened the book and turning to face the boy who had once been his pupil. Naruto simply waved it away and descended to the street below, Kakashi following closely behind. No sweat sensei, he said. Everything's worked out so far, said the white-haired jounin, who opened his new book and nodded in gratitude for the forgiveness. Jiraiya said, let's head to the Hokage's office, more as a directive than a recommendation. With a smile, the Namikaze boy said, can I have an entrance? What did you have in mind? Asked Jiraiya, who returned the smile. Sakura was currently practicing medicine in her personal training room, Sakura, which Tsunade entered at the base of the Hokage tower. Yes Shisho. What is it? The pink-haired ninja asked, wiping the perspiration from her head. Kakashi came by a few minutes ago and said he needs to see you and myself in my office right now, Tsunade said, briefly displaying frustration. Well I'm done for today anyways Sakura said as she packed away her medicinal herbs. So what's this about? The two asked as they left the room and headed upstairs after she finished. I don't know, but when was the last time Kakashi actually asked for anyone to show up somewhere without specifying the time so he can be late? Replied the Hokage. After giving it some thought, Sakura shook her head and said, never, so this must be important. Ah, Hokage. Sama. You have come, was the greeting they heard when they arrived at the Hokage's office and saw Kakashi waiting for them outside the door. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and said, this had better be good Kakashi, which made him perspire. We have 2 guests I think you will want to meet. They're in your office now, he said, swallowing and pointing to the door. Sakura followed closely behind the Hokage as he walked past him and opened the door, but she was unable to see the entire room because her sensei seemed to freeze. She explored Tsunade and looked around the space. To her right, a man she recognized as Jiraiya, a former teammate of her sensei, was leaning against the window, but she was most drawn to the other. Someone who resembled the Yondaime Hokage was sitting at the Hokage's desk with his feet up. In fact, he was wearing the red hat that bore the kanji for Fire Shadow. Minato-kun? Tsunade asked, her eyes wide, and Sakura gave her a suspicious glance. Sorry Obeken, but I think you're mistaking me for someone else, said the Yondaime impersonator, grinning and lifting the red hat to reveal his 6 whisker marks. Naruto, was the Hokage's first reaction upon seeing that smile. Hey Obeken. Did you miss me? He said, removing the hat and setting it on the desk in front of him. You're back? Tsunade asked, turning back to the boy seated at her desk after glancing at her old teammate, who was standing there grinning sheepishly. He leaned back and shrugged, saying, you know I could get used to this chair. Was there ever any doubt? And what pray tell are you doing in my chair, Uzumaki Naruto? She said, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Just getting a feel for it, he said, shrugging slightly while maintaining a smile. Don't get too comfortable. You still have a long way to go before I hand you that hat and seat, she said, shaking her head with a slight smile as he replaced the red hat. Not much further though, Jiraiya muttered to himself, and she heard it. However, the slug, Sennin's apprentice, was just standing there, seemingly in disbelief. She was unable to comprehend what was happening, and with good reason. Her old teammate Uzumaki Naruto was the boy, no, young man, standing in front of her, but she had never before realized how much he resembled the greatest Hokage in the village. She expected the boisterous, brazen, and unyielding boy she remembered from 3 years ago to arrive with fireworks or something, but he didn't. She couldn't believe how much he had changed, at least physically, and he came back like any other person. She had come to terms with the fact that the supposed dead last of her academy class had repeatedly shown himself to be stronger and more courageous than the majority of Chunin, if not Jounin, in the village. However, the person seated at that desk, who bore a striking resemblance to the Yondaime Hokage, exuded an aura of strength and courage that far outstripped anyone she had ever encountered, with the possible exception of the current Kazekage and the Sannin. "Well, how'd I look?" he asked, getting up from the desk and turning to face the pink-haired Kunoichi. She recognized the voice from when he had promised her 3 years prior. "You look like what you always dreamed about being," was the first thing that came to mind when she was at a loss for words. "Sakura-chan, I need to know, how is everyone else? What's happened to everyone while I've been away?" he said, gulping and nodding sadly. He smiled at her. "Well, Neji-san, Tenten-san, Shikamaru-san and Tamari-san all made jounin and everyone else is chunin besides Gara-san. I see. I'm the only genin left. What about Gara?" he said, letting out a sigh and taking a seat again. She replied, "He became Kazekage 2 years ago," which made him grin pitifully. Naruto leaned back and turned to face her. "That's all I need to know. It looks like you were right, Obeken," he said. "It looks like I do have a long way to go to catch up with the others. When's the next Chunin exam?" She responded, "It doesn't matter, you're not entering it," which made him give her the same look she recalled receiving from Uzumaki Kushina years prior. The expression was straightforward. "And what the fuck is that supposed to mean? And why's that? Are the village elders still holding a grudge?" the young man asked before she could say anything more. Sakura's eyes widened as she glanced back and forth between the two without interrupting. "If so, then they're really starting to piss me off." After giving a small nod, the Hokage went on to say, "I found a way around that particular problem because it's no secret that they don't like you." With a cunning smile, she turned back to face Kakashi, who was reading his new book at the door. "Kakashi, gather 3 of Konoha's best jounin and take them to Training Ground 7 where they will be fighting for a jounin promotion with you." "All right, Naruto, I'm not putting you through the Chunin exam because from the pervert's training you're definitely stronger than most Anbu and jounin in this village. I'm putting you straight into a jounin exam, which is a straight-up fight between yourself and several opponents who have the advantage in numbers, ranking, and knowledge of terrain," the white-haired jounin said, nodding before vanishing in a puff of smoke as she turned back to the blonde. "Sounds like fun. What are we waiting for?" Naruto said, getting up and walking past them to the door without knowing what to say. As Jiraiya and Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke and a flash of yellow, followed closely by Tsunade and a stunned Sakura, Jiraiya simply laughed. It was going to get interesting. Fire Country, 7th Training Ground. Unexpectedly, every member of the Konoha 11 Inches was present, as were their individual teachers. When they learned that Naruto had returned and would be taking a jounin exam on his first day back, they all came here. After waiting, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Sakura appeared with a flash of yellow and multiple puffs of smoke. They were joined by a boy they didn't recognize until they noticed his whisker marks and realized he was wearing a red trench coat over a sheathed sword strapped to his waist, as well as a black jumpsuit with orange stripes. When he saw the group, he grinned, but he stopped when Tsunade said, "Okay, what the hell are you all doing here?" "Ino-san eavesdropped on us and kinda told everyone," said Kakashi, who was standing next to Guy and Shikamaru, as he laughed uneasily. "Whatever. Let's just get this over with," the Hokage sighed, slapping her forehead. "All right, this is how it's going to go. Naruto will be facing all 4 of you in a single fight. You have to last 10 minutes against them, Naruto, because if you don't, I don't have to tell you what will happen," she said, pulling Sakura and the group to the side while Kakashi, Guy, Neji, and Shikamaru stayed on the field. "Ready?" Naruto asked, unstrapping his sheathed sword and throwing it to Jiraiya, who caught it and tucked it away in a ceiling. "Scroll." The blonde-haired man nodded, fully aware that Tsunade won't be able to perform the same trick twice when the elders discover it. Jiraiya gave him a nonchalant nod, telling him to begin, without holding back. "Kagemain no jutsu success," was the phrase he used when he discovered he was immobile just as the match began. From in front of him, Shikamaru spoke. He heard Kiba laugh. "It's already over. How I knew it, he's still Adobe," he said. "You have 5 seconds to release me or believe me you won't like my counter attack," Naruto said, grabbing everyone's attention as he didn't listen. The seconds went by with the words, "Very well," from the 4 jounins who narrowed their eyes but remained silent. When he opened his mouth, winds gathered around the field, concentrated, and spun into a tiny sphere that hovered in front of his mouth. Before it floated into his mouth and was swallowed, it compressed into a smaller sphere about the size of a pebble. Shikamaru had to exert himself as the ground cracked beneath him and his entire body suddenly became heavier. Tsunade's eyes were calculated. What the hell is he doing? compressing that much chakra and then swallowing it will only make his body heavier. She turned to see Jiraiya gazing at the battle with a detached expression. So, that's what he created based on the Karabi. Sans 8-tailed cannon, she said. Naruto said, last chance Shikamaru, in a cold tone. With the intention of knocking out the would-be jounin, Guy suddenly sprang forward and materialized in front of him with blinding speed. He aimed to disable the boy by punching his face when he was within range, but it was too late. He heard the words, Raseniki, and then he saw the blonde-haired Genin's mouth belch out the Rasengan, which flew straight past him and hit Shikamaru behind him. A nearby tree was struck by the too slow and hard chakra ball after it exploded on contact in one direction, sending the Nara flying back. Before Guy's hand could strike him, Naruto ducked beneath it and delivered a quick uppercut to his chin, forcing him to retreat. Naruto spun on his heels and launched a Rasengan, which Guy barely avoided when he turned around and threw the energy ball at the beach like a pebble. Naruto attempted to leap forward, but he disappeared in a burst of yellow before resurfacing with Guy Rasengan in his hand. Chidori, said Kakashi, avoiding shins between the two and deflecting the blow with an electric fist. Rasengan. As the two attacks linked and blew both ninja away from the newly formed crater, Guy was just about to escape the blast zone. The Naruto that Neji hit with his Hake Rokuhuion Sho attack was a poofed-out shadow clone, unfortunately. Where is he? He asked, searching around but failing to locate his target. He heard the whisper, below you, and turned to face the ground, but it was too late when he saw Naruto's fist emerge from the earth, just like he had done years before, but this time he was holding a Rasengan, which he drove directly into the Hyuga's middle. After the bale-eyed Jounin gasped in agony. Naruto whirled around him and elbowed Neji in the head, saying, that's two down. Raikiri. Kakashi rushed towards him, his hand covered in lightning, as the sound of 1,000 birds cackling filled the air. He spun a new Rasengan in his hand, which was larger than the ones he had previously used, and created a clone with relative ease. The clone grabbed his free hand and threw him at full speed towards Kakashi. When Guy noticed that the two were approaching at a rate that only he and Lee could match, he made the decision to keep his distance in order to be safe. Odama Rasengan. The earth was beginning to rumble beneath them as the two colliding jutsus caused the ground to tremble. The world turned gray all of a sudden, and a blast of wind blew in from the clash, followed shortly after by a loud explosion. Naruto crashed hard into a nearby boulder as the two flew back, and Kakashi struck multiple trees before stopping. After a brief period of silence, the majority of the audience became shocked by the sheer power the two ninja had just been demonstrating. Naruto stood up and wiped some blood from his mouth, growling low, well, that stung like a bitch. He almost got me with that one. If I was any slower I'd be in the hospital right now. I see you've made several variations of Sensei's jutsu, said Kakashi as he came out of the trees a few seconds later, panting. The young man retorted, it's in the job description to have an original jutsu or two, and began to execute several seals that Kakashi was familiar with. The white-haired Jounin yelled to his lone surviving teammate, he's going to summon, watch yourself Guy. A 10-foot tall toad with a dagger and samurai robes emerged in a huge puff of smoke, shouting, Kachiyose no jutsu. Kichi no Gama. Naruto was standing on top of the toad. Hey Gamakichi, would you mind helping me out here? What's this for? Jounin exam. The toad prince said, sure, why not? But let's make this quick, I've got a date tonight, as Naruto pulled out two kunai that had explosive tags on them. Gamakichi yelled, Kaden. Gamayu Enden, as he threw a lot of oil at the two, and Naruto threw one of the explosive tagged kunai into the stream, setting it on fire. Guy just picked up a big piece of earth and ducked behind it, using it to shield himself from the heat, while Kakashi had to go underground to escape the wave as the flames spread and engulfed the area. Gamakichi was still standing when he dropped the piece of earth after the flames subsided, but Naruto was nowhere to be seen. Behind him, holding the kunai, Naruto emerged and exclaimed, Konoha Haiden. Taijutsu no Ugi. Senin Garashi. Yiu. Guy let out a painful scream before removing the offending item from his now bloody ass cheek. Even though Naruto only smiled and appeared innocent, the audience gasped at the technique. What? It's a dangerous technique, especially now. Kakashi yelled, Guy, drop the kunai now, but it was too late. Guy managed to drop the weapon, but the explosive tag, which he hadn't noticed, exploded when it hit the ground, sending the green beast crashing hard into a nearby boulder, bleeding and unconscious. Damn it. You're all that's left, he said, turning back to face his former pupil. That's 3 Kakashi, sensei. Megan. Jubaku Satsu, said the white-haired Jounin, narrowing his eyes and widening his Sharingan eye. That won't work on me, was the phrase that everyone saw as Naruto, caught in the genjutsu, froze for a moment before his body began to shake violently and the symbol on his right began to glow yellow. I have 2 Sharingan wielders as enemies, so what makes you think I haven't developed a countermeasure to genjutsu? He said quietly, looking directly into his former sensei's Sharingan eye. Kakashi exclaimed, Suiryuden no Jutsu, after completing multiple hand seals. A water-based dragon sprang from the neighboring lake and was aimed at his blonde adversary. As before, Naruto extended his hand and conjured one of his chakra balls, which he then hurled at the approaching dragon, causing it to explode upon impact, capturing the water dragon in the process. Under his mask, Kakashi grinned and remarked, I think we'll have to end this now, but you've definitely improved, Naruto. Going toe-to-toe with 4 Jounin exclusively proves it. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he said, drawing the attention of the white-haired Jounin as 2 lone figures appeared at the teen's side. Naruto extended his hand and said, Okay, sensei. We'll do it your way with one last clash. The 2 clones then got to work. This jutsu isn't completed yet, but I've already surpassed how far the Yondaime got with it. With wide eyes, Kakashi began a series of hand seals before extending his hand and saying, if that's. As a ball of spinning chakra and wind swirled in Naruto's open palm, a terrifying screech reverberated throughout the space. Let's get wild, he yelled as he rushed forward, the wind ball in hand. The words, let me see if you really have surpassed Minato, sensei, were spoken as Kakashi rushed forward to intercept after his hand became engulfed in electricity. Futon. Rasengan, Raiden, Udama Chidori. Both attacks caused the entire clearing to collapse, and Kakashi was blasted back with a loud explosion, slamming into the boulder next to Guy. The audience saw Naruto standing after the dust settled. Despite the fact that he seemed to be holding his chest and breathing heavily, he spat out some blood after coughing for a moment. His mouth was wiped. Damn, that was brutal, he said. Tsunade overheard Jiraiya say, he didn't even need to use his sage mode or his sword to beat them. His progress is unreal. During this time, the Hokage gave her former teammate a close look and said, you knew he was going to win from the start, didn't you? I don't train apprentices, I train Hokages, he said gravely, meeting her gaze. Well done, Naruto. You just made Jounin, but I think you might have overdone it a little, she said, nodding before turning back to the field. Sakura, Ino. Get to work on healing them. They shouldn't be hurt too much, Tsunade said, turning to face the 4 unconscious Jounin that the blonde had beaten. He nodded in comprehension. After things had calmed down, the group found themselves seated at a rather large dining table in the Hyuga compound, where everyone had dressed up for the Konoha 11 reunion, as Kiba was referring to it. The majority of the men were dressed in their finest attire, while the majority of the girls were decked out in a variety of dresses. You're late, Sakura said, squinting at Naruto as he walked in. Don't tell me you're picking up Kakashi Sensei's bad habits. He defended his position by saying, no, I needed to find out where I'm living now. I thought you already have an apartment, she said, raising an eyebrow at him. I do, but I'm moving out into a bigger place, he clarified. The pink-haired Kunoichi sat down and took his sheathed sword out, asking, really? Where? Well, I'm moving into an empty compound just outside of the village. I'll invite you all sometime when I've settled in, he said, setting it so it leaned on the table. Naturally, Ino wanted to hear any rumors, so he asked, so are you going to tell us what happened on your trip or what? Meet anyone interesting? After a moment of reflection, Naruto's thoughts turned to Yugito. He fought back a flush at the memory of carrying her partially nude body back to his room following the Bloodhowlers incident. I didn't do anything much other than training, and as for people I've met, not many, he said. Kiba appeared to growl, hey Dobi. What was up with the flash when you moved? Naruto shrugged as he turned to face him. Just genetics, I think, he said. Is he saying what I think he's saying? Asked Shino, Neji, and Shikamaru, while the others narrowed their eyes in confusion. Was going through each of the three's heads. After a little while, the group started talking as the dinner was served. Tenten eventually asked, hey Naruto-san, what kind of sword is that? After glancing at the blade resting on the table. It doesn't really have a name, but I call it the Master Sword, the recently promoted blonde Jounin said, glancing down at his sword. He lifted it and slowly unshed it so that the blade could be seen by the people in the now quiet room. She ran her fingers along it after he handed it to her hilt. First, she noticed the picture of 3 triangles in the middle, but she didn't recognize the symbols on it. She whispered, "It's beautiful," and returned the sword to him. "But I don't recognize the symbols on it. Where did you get it?" "In a forest north of Wind Country nearly 2 years ago," he said candidly while sheathing the blade. "It was lodged in a pedestal behind a very large door." That made the weapon's mistress's eyes widen. "Really? You found it in a forest?" she asked. He put the blade down next to him and said, "Yeah, why?" "It's nothing," she said, shaking her head. Tenten continued to shoot Naruto and the sword as the room's conversation resumed, saying, "You know, if he dressed in a green tunic he'd look like, nah, couldn't be. There is no way that old wives' tale is true. That's just one of my mom's bedtime stories." Lightning Nation. Archive Library, Kumo. "Who are you?" Every time Yugito glanced at the tiny triangle necklace she wore around her neck, the question that tormented her kept coming up. She let out a frustrated sigh as it sparkled in the sunlight. She had known Naruto for 2 years, but she still couldn't stop thinking about him. When she went on missions, they were typically AS class, and she spent most of the time taking down high-ranking Nukenin. The only time she didn't think about him was when she was working, if you can call it that. She used the remainder of her time to train and gain a better understanding of the general public. Her jutsu arsenal was small and restricted but incredibly potent. She specifically created 2 jutsus, the second of which was a stronger variant of the first. Naturally, that leads us to the present circumstance. She has been aware of the tiny scar on her right hand for the past 2 years, which developed after she bid Naruto farewell. She also wanted to know exactly what the scar was because it glowed blue whenever she touched the necklace. She then started looking through the archives to find any mention of the necklace or the symbol in general. She had requested that one of the librarians in charge of the enormous archive bring her anything he could find on the triad symbol and the necklace she wore when she first arrived. The librarian asked if she needed anything else after bringing a big stack of books back and placing them on the table. After expressing her gratitude, she began reading the books in the hopes of discovering a hint as to the meaning of the symbol. Shaking her head, the female jounin surveyed the books she had spread out on the big round table. One of the books caught her eye as she was looking at them. It was white with a black outline, and the cover featured the triad symbol in 3 different colors, with text printed over each triangle. Naturally, the colors were red, blue, and green, with the words courage, wisdom, and power printed over each one, respectively. "I thought I'd find you here," was the voice that startled her after many hours had passed. "I didn't think you liked archaeology," she said, turning to see her grandfather leaning on one of the nearby bookcases. She said, "I don't," as she leaned back in her seat. "Then why are you looking at that book? It looks like a book on a myth, or a legend." "Oh, if he only knew," the Hokage said, raising an eyebrow. "I'm trying to find out where this necklace came from and why it resonates with the scar on my hand," she replied. "I see," he sighed. "Well, you're going to have to continue this later. I'm afraid we have a prior engagement. I trust you remember that it is almost time for the annual Elemental Royal Ball," he said softly as she gave him a startled look. "It's that time again already?" Yugito asked, looking more surprised. "Please tell it's not being held in Iwa again," he said, smiling and nodding. The Hokage grinned knowingly and said, "No, it's being held in Konoha this time around, and before you ask, yes, you need to dress for the occasion." That made her complain. Fire Nation. Hokage's office, Konoha. "What?" a startled Naruto inquired. "What do you mean Gaara's been kidnapped?" he asked, his sword now firmly strapped to his back, partially concealing the kanji on his trench coat. "Just like it sounds," Tsunade said, passing a mission form to Kakashi. "I'm assigning Team Kakashi to retrieve him." "Naruto, Kakashi, the ones who kidnapped him are your old friends Akatsuki." At that, the copy. Nin and the fox flash tensed up, and Sakura appeared perplexed. "Who's Akatsuki?" she asked. "A group of 9 S-class criminals, 2 of which attacked Konoha 3 years ago hunting for Naruto," was Kakashi's response. "By hunting you mean?" Sakura fell silent. "Yes, hunting as in they wanted to capture and or kill him," Kakashi concluded after nodding. As Naruto said, "And now they have Gaara," he clenched his fists. "Do we even know which Akatsuki members took him?" Tsunade replied, "A Nukenin from Iwa called Deidara. He appears to use chakra clay as mobile bombs and high-yield explosives." This time, Kakashi questioned, "What about the other?" "His name is Sasori. He's the grandson of one of Suna's village elders. Chio, I think her name was. He's a puppet master of the highest caliber. Far better than Gaara." Dono's brother, the Hokage, simply said. When Kakashi said, "We'll go out now and head for Suna first. Find out where they went and then go after them," she nodded. Good luck, Tsunade wished them before Kakashi vanished in a cloud of air. Looking at Sakura, Naruto questioned, "Do you know Shunshin no Jutsu?" "No, I never really got a chance to learn it," she said, shaking her head. He smiled at Tsunade and grabbed her shoulder, saying, "All right then." Got a flash? The Hokage sighed as the two vanished in a flash of yellow. "Where's my sake? Wind Country, Hospital, Suna." Kakashi met a slow moving Tamari on the road while traveling to Suna team and informed her of her younger brother's condition. When they eventually reached the village, they found that Sasori had brutally beaten Kankuro and abandoned him for dead. Although it was taking a while, Sakura was now removing the poison from him. Another incident involved an elder, Chiyo, who attacked Kakashi, believing him to be his father, Hitaki Tsukumo. Naruto stopped her attack by holding a kunai at her neck. Following a long conversation with Kankuro, the group made their way north to the ancient caves, where Chiyo wished to accompany them in order to face her grandson. However, they encountered a minor issue en route. In front of a man in a black cloak with red clouds, the four fell into the rocky clearing. "Those eyes are the..." Sakura appeared to just recognize the eyes now, and Chiyo trailed off. "Sharingan? He's the brother of Sasuke-kun, isn't he?" The Chunin with the pink hair flashed in recognition. The words, "Uchiha Itachi," snarled Naruto. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here." "Easy Naruto," Kakashi said, keeping both of Itachi's eyes fixed on him. Itachi said, "Naruto-kun, Kakashi," in a monotone. "It's good to see you both again." "Wish I could say the same Teme," Naruto growled as he charged ahead. Kakashi attempted to stop him, saying, "Naruto, wait." The Uchiha muttered, "Fool," and withdrew an Anbu style sword, cleaving Naruto in half before he vanished into thin air. Itachi said, irritated, "I cannot be fooled so easily," as he searched for the blonde. Just as a ball that he knew to be a Rasengan slammed into the ground where he was standing from above and exploded with tremendous force, his danger senses went off, and he leapt to the right. When he looked up and saw Naruto far above, Itachi exclaimed, "Kaden! Gukakyu no Jutsu!" and threw a huge ball of fire at him before getting back up. Using Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto made a clone and hauled himself away from the flames. He focused his wind elemental chakra into the futon Rasen, rotating plate chakra after he was out of the fireball's range. Shunpo no Jutsu appeared as he pushed off and vanished in a flash of yellow when his feet made contact with the plate in midair. Even though the boy's sword stabbed Itachi in the cheek, he was just in time to turn and avoid Naruto's attack. "Got you? I draw first blood," was the Uchiha's declaration as he skidded away, determined to put some distance between them. Itachi narrowed his eyes and said, "And it shall be your last," as Naruto dropped into battle stance, sword ready. Itachi's eyes widened as he turned around, and the fox flash smiled. "You do remember I'm not the only one here, right?" Reikari means to be struck in the shoulder by a lightning blade. Pulling his arm out and allowing the electricity to go out, Kakashi said. "You cannot escape," Itachi said as he skidded off, clutching his bleeding shoulder and gasping for air. Naruto yelled, "You're not Itachi either," and Kakashi nodded. "You're too easy." The Uchiha appeared to wince from his wound when he asked, "And how do you figure that?" "The simple reason," Naruto said, "because you haven't noticed you're about to die." Itachi watched the two as if they were going to attack, but all of a sudden his sense of danger flared up once more. The blow landed on the Uchiha's head, and with the added force of precise chakra control of super strength, it sent dust scattering for roughly 10 to 30 meters. Sakura appeared in the air behind him, her leg extended in a heel drop. Sakura yelled, "Satenkyaku!" as she delivered the blow. The intensity of the attack caused Naruto to whistle, and when the dust settled, he couldn't help but perspire at the crater's enormity and the half-dead Itachi sprawled in its middle. Note to self: never, ever irritate Sakura-chan. While Kakashi merely shook his head, Naruto made a mental note. With a drop of perspiration, the copy, Nin thought, definitely another Tsunade, and went over to the body. After examining it, he yelled, "Everyone come over here and look at this. Something's not right." When the elder and the two teenagers showed up by his side, they looked down at the body and saw something strange. Chiyo exclaimed, This is a man named Yura. He's a jounin from our village." Startled, Kakashi questioned suspiciously, "If that's true, what's he doing impersonating Itachi?" The elder shook her head. He can't be traitor. He's been faithful to Suna for many years, incredulously. I think someone was controlling him, probably Itachi himself, Naruto remarked as he examined the body from a crouch. He glared and got back up. If that's true, then this was just a distraction, he said. Shio remarked, they've already started the extraction process then, as she peered down at the corpse. Extraction? Sakura inquired bewilderedly. Akatsuki wants the Biju and the Ichibi no Tanuki. Suna no Shukaku is sealed inside of Gaara. The boy will die if they extract Shukaku, Shio retorted. But if Akatsuki is after Biju, then why would they come after Nar, the pink-haired Chunin said, looking at her teammates in confusion and fear. She looked at the blonde jounin and asked simply, you have a Biju sealed inside of you, don't you? When he nodded, she looked down at the floor and recalled everything she had witnessed of the boy, including the bullying, the reprimands at the academy, and the way her parents had spoken about him before they died. It's Kyuubi, isn't it? She asked when he nodded. Naruto replied, yeah, the old furball is real cranky these days, hoping she would despise him. Sakura whispered, why didn't you tell me? To him. You never asked, he said, flashing one of his phony grins. The kunoichi questioned, what are you then? Despite his hesitation, he told her, I might as well tell you. I am the jailer, the prison, and if I play my cards right, executioner of Kyuubi no Kitsune, she said, seemingly taken aback. Is that why everyone hated you? She asked, covering her face with her left hand and shaking her head. The blonde corrected, smiling, oh, the villagers still hate me, they just haven't recognized me yet. We'll talk about this later, but right now we have a mission to complete. Agreed. Kakashi cut in, gesturing to the edge of the trees. We have to keep moving before nightfall. Naruto started to say, yeah, we should, but stopped when he saw something. Yura was standing up and pointing his sword at Shio, saying, watch out. Sakura and Shio heard him too, but they were unable to turn in time as Kakashi spun around, realizing the danger but knowing he wasn't quick enough. A flash of yellow suddenly appeared between them, and Naruto barely stopped the puppet's sword with the master sword. In one quick motion, the blonde slammed a spinning ball into the middle of the puppet with his free hand. Rasengan. Yura slammed hard into a nearby tree after being blown back several feet. To complete the task, Kakashi yelled, Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu, and released a massive ball of fire from behind his mask. With his sword in hand, Naruto questioned, did we get him this time? He won't be getting up this time around, Kakashi said, nodding and using his Sharingan to examine the now burned body from a distance. The blonde muttered, that was too close, as he put his sword away. Shio thanked him, and Naruto nodded. Thank you, child. If it weren't for you, I'd be dead right now. Kakashi gave the order, let's move out, and the group vanished once more into the trees. After setting up camp a few hours later, Sakura questioned, why? As night fell. Excuse me? Asked Naruto, perplexed by the inquiry. Kakashi appeared somewhat uneasy as Sakura explained. Why were you chosen to hold the fox? From what the history books say, the Yondaime was an honorable man. He wouldn't just grab a child from the hospital at random. Kakashi started, Sakura, I'm not sure you should. But Naruto replied, because to be a Jinchuriki means you have to fulfill one requirement. You have to be related to a Kage. But that would mean that you're. Everything suddenly made sense, and even Shio appeared taken aback. You're the son of the Yondaime Hokage, aren't you? He asked, pointing to his blonde hair, blue eyes, trench coat, flash of yellow when he moved quickly, and Rasengan. Yes, he replied with a nod. Sakura looked down at the campfire and said, I see, why? Naruto clarified, I have my own problems to deal with. Akatsuki is one of them. When the blonde said, I don't need my dad's enemies coming after me, at least not yet, her tone was sorrowful. Not like anyone would believe it anyway. That's not true, countered the kunoichi. You've changed a lot of opinions in the village. I think the only ones who still hate you are the elders. Surprised, he said, really? She smiled and nodded. When I asked people why they used to hate you, they said it was classified and that they had gotten over it. Well, Naruto thought. As he lay down in his sleeping bag, the silver-haired jounin said irritably, would you two please go to sleep? We need to head out early tomorrow in case you've forgotten. When they arrived at the northern caves at sunrise the following morning, they were pleasantly surprised to see Team Guy, who looked a little ruffled, waiting at the entrance, which was blocked by a big boulder bearing a seal tag. Lee said, Naruto.kun, Sakura-chan, smiling. You're late, Kakashi, complained Guy. Even later than us, and we were sent here as your backup. The words, "We got lost on the road of life," came to mind as Kakashi grinned, his heart's genjutsu shining behind him. "Alright, what do we have here?" Kakashi asked gravely as Guy complained even more, and he abruptly went back into his Enbu mode, as his team had called it. Guy nodded toward the seal tag. "I'm not a seal master, so I don't know what the hell that is. Whatever it is, it's created a barrier around the entire cavern and we can't break through it." "That's a 5 seal barrier," Naruto remarked, glancing up at the barrier. Kakashi replied, "Yes, I'm familiar with them. Neji-san, use your Byakugan and see if you can find any others in the neighboring area." "Yes, I can see them," the white jounin said, nodding as the veins around his eyes widened. "They're scattered evenly in all 4 directions," he said, surveying the area. 8 clones materialized at Naruto's side and said, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, tell them where." The 8 clones dispersed as Neji indicated the general locations, and the real Naruto leapt onto the boulder and took his place. He verified that they were all in place and on a timer after 4 of the clones were dispelled. He tore off the tag as he mentally counted to 0, and his clones immediately followed suit with the other tags. To Team Guy's surprise, Sakura super punched the boulder after he leapt off, breaking it into dust. After that, the 2 teams entered and were greeted by a huge statue in a dark cavern. 2 individuals were standing over a sleeping and still Kazekage in the middle of this. Sabaku no Gaara. "Gaara," Naruto muttered as he gazed at his motionless body. "You're too late, he's dead," said Deidara, the Akatsuki member, grinning at this. Naruto snarled and reached for his sword, saying, "You'll pay for this." When Deidara said, "You must be the Kyuubi Jinchuriki," her smile grew. "Sasori, I know you don't want to hear this, but I'll be capturing the brat." With a sudden appearance behind them, Guy grabbed Gaara and said, "You got the Ichibi Jinchuriki? Why would I let you?" Before vanishing and resurfacing with the 2 teams. Reprimanding, "That wasn't very nice," Deidara said. Naruto said, "Shove it. You won't be leaving here alive. That's a promise," as he took his sword out of its sheath. Deidara grinned and asked, "What makes you think you stand a chance against us, demon?" Naruto grinned and replied, "Because you Iwa-nins could never beat a yellow flash," to which the Akatsuki member gave him a hateful glare. "Fuzzy brows, Sakura Chan. You 2 handle Puppet Boy over there. I'll deal with Iwa. Prick. Everyone else make sure they do not get out of this cave." 3 clones materialized at his side as the 2 teams nodded and said, "Let's get wild." Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Wind Country. Mountains in the north with Sakura right behind him. Lee lunged forward to kill Sasori. Sasori appeared irritated and pulled off his cloak to reveal his body, which caused the 2 teams to pause and both Lee and Sakura to stop in disbelief. It wasn't until Chio spoke up that they realized Sasori's body was actually a gigantic puppet in the shape of a scorpion. When the elder yelled at them, "It's not his real body. He's probably just using it as a shell." Sakura and Lee nodded when they heard this, then rushed forward once more, but more quickly this time. Sasori opened its mouth and threw a volley of needles at them, unconcerned. But Lee shoved them both away before they could strike, and they went on. Sasori decided to entertain them by moving to block a blow from Lee and then attempting to use the scorpion's claw to cut him in half. Even though he no longer had feelings, he almost seemed to enjoy playing with these kids when the claw missed and he swung the scorpion's tail to knock Lee away. Unfortunately for him, that didn't last long because he quickly looked around the cavern for the pink-haired girl he had seen running toward him and discovered that she was okay. In addition to shattering Sasori's scorpion body, she sent a shockwave of dirt in all directions when she dropped from the ceiling at high speed and delivered one of her heel drop kicks straight down. Satenkyaku. When Deidara saw this, he realized that the 2 Akatsuki members couldn't defeat 2 teams of Jounin and Chunin, especially since he hadn't been able to replenish his clay after using it up fighting Gaara over Suna a few days prior. On his enormous clay bird, the bomber glided toward the cave entrance in the hopes of using the dust from Sakura's attack as cover. Unfortunately for him, this was not the case, as Neji picked him up and fled. As Deidara's bird approached with his Byakugan, Neji told the others, "The Iwa Nin is trying to escape." Tenten asked, "Where?" and he gestured. After a few seconds, she asked, "Did I hit anything?" as she produced a scroll and opened a volley of kunai, directing the barrage in the direction he had indicated. Then, she heard multiple explosions. Neji wrote, "Yes. Those explosive tags seem to have destroyed his clay bird, but he appears to still be moving towards us, before transforming into his Juken form." Deidara whispered, "Ketsu," as he emerged through the dust, grinning. The entire cavern was rocked by explosions in the ceiling above them, causing it to collapse. Tenten dodged some falling debris by performing a quick Kaden to deflect the rock fragment at the last second. Deidara shot past him in the direction of Kakashi, Chio, and Guy, who were standing at the entrance itself, just as the dust had cleared. When the Hyuga turned to intercept, he was confronted by a small clay bird. He attempted a Kaden, but was only halfway through when the clay exploded in his face. He was eventually caught by the weapon's mistress after being knocked out of the smoke by the explosion's force. Having only the medical knowledge necessary for first aid, she examined him and discovered that he was unconscious and that steam seemed to be streaming off of him, indicating that he had been burned multiple times. However, she did not find any scratches on him. She quickly realized that although his Kaden was only partially established, it was able to deflect the majority of the heat from the explosion, but not the actual blow that had knocked him out. "Stupid fool, you're almost killing yourself trying to save me," Tenten said, grinning tearfully as she placed him on the ground. When Sasori destroyed the already precarious ceiling, Deidara and the others came to a complete halt. The bomber was blasted back hard when Naruto stepped in front of him and slammed a Rasengan into his stomach. The blonde jounin muttered, "Fast little bugger," as he looked at the other Akatsuki member. Sakura dodged the numerous projectiles that the Akatsuki puppet master threw at her as she skidded along the cavern's wall. After removing his puppet suit, Sasori produced another scroll that revealed a human puppet that Chio was familiar with, the Sandame Kazekage. "Sasori you," Chio exclaimed, her heart pounding rapidly, as she took in the scene. "Green boy. Pink. Haired girl. That puppet is the Sandame Kazecage's body. It can use what's called iron sand, just like the Ichibi no Tanuki." Lee was unaware of the danger when the puppet ejected what appeared to be a stream of black sand because he had no idea what that was. But Sakura recalled the One-Day War, when she and Naruto had been sent to assist Sasuke in his battle against Gaara, and she saw that the sand this puppet used was nearly the same as his own. Sasori muttered, "Satetsu Shigur," to activate the puppet. The pink-haired Kunoichi watched as the puppet appeared to shoot towards Lee while priming an attack with his sand. Even though he remembered his battle with Gaara from 3 years prior, he was taken aback by this and could not avoid it. With significant force behind it, Sakura shoved him aside and was struck hard by the sand. It didn't go very far, but when Naruto emerged above it and used a Rasengan to cut it clean, the sand broke away from the main portion, though some of it was still engraved in Sakura's skin. He glanced back at her and saw that she had already used medical ninjutsu to remove the iron sand from her arms. He asked, keeping his gaze fixed on the two Akatsuki members, "You alright? The sand is poisonous. Don't let it touch you because I don't have much of the antidote left," she said as she gave herself an injection using a tiny syringe. "Antidote? My poisons can have an antidote made by a child. This girl is who?" Clearly no, Sasori no longer thought this circumstance was funny. Deidara shouted to his companion, "We should leave, now," while perched atop another enormous clay bird he had made. Agreed. The Sandame Kazekage was immediately resealed by the puppet master. Kakashi yelled, "Don't let them escape," as he and Gai Shunshin soared over the two and launched an assault. Konoha Daizenpu. Deidara was knocked off the bird and pushed back down into the collapsed cavern with a powerful double-spinning kick. "Rakery!" exclaimed Kakashi as he used a lightning fist to cut the clay bird in half. Naruto was behind Sasori when he used a single shunpo and swung his sword, but the puppet master blocked him with a blade that appeared to come from his own body. When Chio saw the Akatsuki cloak he was wearing fall to the ground, her eyes widened. When she saw Sasori's once-human body reduced to a mere shell and infused with multiple weapons, she thought, he turned himself into a living puppet. Sasori appeared to be restrained by a long cable as he backed off into the air after a few more blade clashes. When Deidara saw this, he made one more big clay bird to try to get away before throwing all of his other clay birds at the teams. In order to deflect the projectiles, Kakashi performed multiple hand seals and slammed his hands into the ground, forming a wall of solid mud. Doden. Doryuheki. The copy.nin heard explosions as the bird exploded when it made contact with the wall, saying, "They're just using this as a distraction, they're getting away." When Naruto said, "Not if I can help it, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he made 2 clones. The moment the wall drops, get the hell out of the way. Deidara smiled as the two turned to depart and rose into the air above the ruined cavern. "A clean getaway," she said. Sasori said, "Let's head back now, we're no match for that group all at once," before he fell to the ground and replaced his cloak. However, a sudden gust of wind and a deafening screech deafened the area just as they were ready to depart. As they turned around, they noticed that the wall had fallen, But more significantly, they saw the person they knew to be Kyuubi Jinchuriki holding up his right arm, which was filled with a horrifying object. Deidara exclaimed, "What the hell is that?" and was ready to watch his clay bird flee when he suddenly found himself standing on it just a few inches away. "Oh crap," he exclaimed. Naruto yelled, "Futon!" Rasen Shuriken, as the bomber was hurled back with great force and caught in a whirling wind vortex. Sasori knew he was pretty much dead after seeing this, so he fled quickly through the forest on foot in an attempt to avoid being pursued. Before the slashing winds simply stopped, allowing Deidara's severely damaged and disfigured body to fall and land on the Akatsuki Biju collector statue, he screamed as they tore his body apart. Sakura leapt high and gave the clay bird a super punch, shattering it as she landed once more. The pink-haired Kunoichi looked at the statue's top and asked, "Is he dead?" Naruto clutched his right arm, which he used to wield the jutsu, and winced in pain. "That was a direct hit. If he isn't dead, then he will be in a few minutes," he said. Sakura inquired, "Are you all right?" with a hint of concern. He said, "My arm hurts," and shook it to make it go away. "That jutsu hasn't been tested, so I guess it still has some problems to work out." She grabbed his hand and said, "Let me take a look at it," scanning it. "Where did Sasori go?" Chio inquired as she leapt from the tiny crater. "He's escaped. Even with my Byakugan I cannot locate him," said the now conscious Neji, shaking his head. "Okay. Let's pack up Kazekage. Sama and Kakashi sighed, covering his Sharingan eye with his Hite. Naruto heard the shout in the back of his mind, "Kid behind you," and pushed Sakura away as he ducked to the right, just as a wave of regular sand flew past the statue. "What the?" Lee grunted as he caught the girl with the pink hair. "Is that?" Sakura could not say as a thunderous roar echoed through the room. Naruto heard, "Kid at Shukaku," once more. "Kyuubi, however," he asked in. The nine tails roared back, "Yes me you hairless ape. You became irresponsible and your opponent's body fell on the Biju statue." "So what?" As he watched the statue break apart and the sand converge to form something, Naruto questioned. "So the body was bleeding. Blood plus Biju statue equals very bad." Kyuubi sighed with rage. "Every Biju statue copies whatever Biju is passed through it, as in it's building a copy of that blasted raccoon." "Oh, I see. You're having problems," Naruto said, perspiring. The hideous fox growled, "Don't get us killed, brat," and then fell silent. "I have great plans for us." Tenten looked up at the enormous sand tanuki in horror and said quietly, "What the heck is that?" Sakura shook visibly as she asked, "Is that what I think it is?" Naruto said, "Suna no Shukaku," as he put his sword away. "Ichibi no tanuki." Sakura startled everyone by asking, "This is the thing you fought 3 years ago during the auto Suna attack?" without averting her gaze from the monster. In response, Naruto nodded, "Yeah, but it was contained by Gaara back then. Even if this thing is just a copy of the original, I doubt it's going to be as easy taking it down this time around." Lee looked at the great demon lord with a hint of fear and said, "Wait. This thing was in Kazekage. Sama? You mentioned it was a copy so we can beat it, right? As long as it's not identical to the original power-wise, then we should be fine," the Fox Flash said with a nervous laugh. Chio replied, "I agree. The original Shukaku could have wiped out everything with a 10-mile radius by now." The latter made everyone shudder. "So it's either not as powerful as the original or it just hasn't gained most of its power yet," the speaker said. "So what do we do?" replied Guy to the group, "It's almost finished constructing. I doubt it will just play nice when it's done." Kakashi turned to face the blonde and said, "Naruto, you've faced this thing before. Any ideas?" "When I fought Gaara, he was literally stuck to the thing's head and all I had to do was keep pounding him directly instead of the rest of the thing," Naruto told him. "That was the only weakness I know, but without a Jinchuriki holding most of its power at bay, I doubt there will be anyone connected to its head this time around." "How about you, Shio-san?" Kakashi turned to ask. "The Biju have no weaknesses. At least Shukaku doesn't," the elder said, shaking her head. Naruto heard the whisper, "summons," and despite his hatred for the fox, he understood what it was referring to. Naruto's words, "Sakura and I will handle this alone. You all take Gaara and get out of here," caught everyone's attention. "We're not leaving," Tenten informed him. "I have an idea on how to do this and right now only Sakura and I can go about doing it, unless you go a better idea?" the Fox Flash asked with a fox-like smile. After squinting at the blonde, Kakashi nodded and said, "Okay, but don't get yourselves killed." Naruto nodded, and the others grudgingly departed. We won't. That's a promise, he said. Pulling on her gloves, the kunoichi asked, so what's the plan? With a broad smile, Naruto inquired, how much chakra do you have left? She glanced between the blonde and the demon lord copy and said, half my reserves. Why? He smiled at her and said, tell me, have you signed the slug summoning contract yet? She replied, yes, but I don't know the hand seals, with a smirk tugging at her lips. He told her, well, you'd better learn quickly, and began demonstrating the hand seals for the intended jutsu. With its construction complete, the sand monster screamed across the landscape. R R R R R R R O A R R R R R R R R R R R. Tenten broke the silence that had fallen on the group following the roar by saying, we shouldn't have left them back there. Neji whispered to her, our mission is to retrieve Gaara. We were meant to bring him back alive, the mistress of the weapon muttered. Guy looked around and asked, where's Chiyo? Chiyo, what are you doing? Kakashi asked, feeling a presence behind him, as he turned to see Chiyo hovering over Gaara's still body with her hands glowing blue. She strained to say, redeeming myself and giving Suna a new hope, before passing out next to Gaara's corpse. The elder said, live long, Kazekage. Sama, and then closed his eyes. He's alive. The elder must have used some kind of kinjutsu to bring him back to life, Neji said, checking Gaara's body with his eyes while the rest of the group watched in silence, unsure of what to do. Damn it, was Kakashi's dejected sigh. Two distant voices cried out, Kachiyose no jutsu. Two huge explosive shockwaves and smoke puffs indicated two huge summonings. When Kakashi noticed Gamabunta and Katsuyu standing tall above the tree line, facing Shukaku, he trailed off, don't tell me those two. Lee asked, what are they? As he looked at the giants and saw Sakura and Naruto standing on Katsuyu's and Gamabunta's heads, respectively. Guy responded, their boss summons of the Toad and Slug sages, as he watched in wonder. Their flames of youth are both burning brightly. Those two. They've surpassed me, Kakashi thought as he observed his two former pupils. With Sasuke they would count as the Neo-Sanin. Hey, I'm so proud of you both, he said, grinning beneath his mask. From the Toad King's head, Naruto said, hey Bunta. Do you mind giving me a hand against this walking pile of sand? Shukaku. Brad, I thought you learned your lesson the last time about messing with someone like him. All right, but you're paying for our next drink. Gamabunta sighed after puffing on his pipe. Naruto smiled like a fox and nodded. With a sly smile, the Toad King said, let's go wild. Sakura summoned her and asked, will you aid me in this fight, Katsuyu? The Slug Queen said, it would be a pleasure to render my assistance, Sakura. Sama, and the two prepared to confront the sand monster. At least you had the decency to bring help this time, brat, Gamabunta said. Shut up, scoffed Naruto, irritated. Just hold that thing off for a few moments while I charge up. After that, the blonde leapt from the Toad and began creating hand seals. Futon. Renkuden. Shukaku let out a sharp surge of wind. Sweden. Tepodama no jutsu. Gamabunta blocked the attack with a water blast from his mouth, resulting in a powerful explosion between the two giants. Futon. Renkuden. The sand monster struck once more, but this time it hit the Toad with multiple blasts that swept across the battlefield. Sweden. Tepodama no jutsu. Gamabunta launched another barrage of water to block it, but one burst through. Crap. Just as it was about to strike him, Katsuyu stepped aside and took the hit for him, absorbing the majority of the blow with her sponge. Like body. Katsuyu. Heim. Are you okay? Just as Sakura emerged above Shukaku and delivered a super punch to the face, causing it to reel back, she responded, I'll be fine, shrugging off the blow. Activated Sage Mode, Naruto found himself standing on Gamabunta's head once more as the ground rumbled beneath them. He said, thanks for holding him off, which made the Toad King smile. Looking up and observing the horizontally slitted pupils in his eyes, Gamabunta said, about time. What took you so long? Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. It's about time we ended this fight anyway, Sakura said, staring at him. Removing a kunai that has been marked, ready when you are, with an explosive tag. The pink-haired Shunin ran out of the line of fire as the Toad King yelled, girl, you'd better get out of the way. Kaden. Gamayu Enden. The oil that spewed from Gamabunta's mouth was ignited by Naruto's explosive kunai, transforming it into a stream of fire and devastation that struck Shukaku and turned his sand filled body into solid glass. Naruto leapt forward and created a clone, which began spinning a huge ball of chakra. When he got close, he slammed the enormous ball into the glass monster, causing it to shatter into hundreds of thousands of pieces with a powerful explosion. Sho Udama Rasengan. The explosion that followed was the biggest she had ever seen. It was powerful enough to hollow out a mountain in one use. All that was left after the dust settled was a tiny canyon covered in numerous glass fragments. Sakura fell beside Naruto, still in Toad Sage mode, who was panting. Gazing out over the small canyon, she asked, "Did you get him?" "Deactivation of Sage mode. Yeah, he's down, but we should probably destroy the shards just in case," he replied with a nod, his expression returning to normal. Sakura gave that a nod and beckoned to Katsuyu, saying, "Just to be safe, destroy the shards." The slug queen belched a stream of acid into the canyon, destroying the shards, and called back, "Okay, Zeshi Nensen." After the last of the shards were destroyed, Gamabunta let out a loud laugh and said, "If that's all, I think I'll be going now." "Remember, brat, the drinks are on you next time," he said, grinning again before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Katsuyu said, "Until next time, Sakura Sama," and then he vanished as well. "Bye, I guess." Shunin, who had pink hair, blinked. "Come on. The others are probably waiting for us," Naruto said, shaking his head before nodding toward the tree line. Despite his weariness, he began to move. Ignoring her weariness, Sakura called after him, "Hey, wait up. Gosh, I love what I do. Wind Country, Eastern Gates of Suna." To watch the two teams depart, Gaara and his siblings stood at the gate that resembled a canyon. 2 days had passed since the battle with Akatsuki, and the Kazekage had recovered fairly well, likely thanks to Sakura's medical prowess. Gaara genuinely couldn't understand why she had brought Chiyo back to life, someone she regarded as a weapon, at the expense of her own life, especially since his funeral had taken place earlier that day. Even though he still hated Kakashi, he couldn't help but thank her for saving him when she told him that she wanted to give Suna hope for the future. He watched as the group completed packing their belongings and couldn't help but smile a little as he looked at the two teams. He began to recall the discussion he and Naruto had had in his office a few days prior. Flashback without jutsu start angry. Naruto sat down in one of the room's many seats and exclaimed, "Damn it man, don't die again." HN. The Kazekage sat down at his desk and said nothing else. The blonde questioned in mild shock, "You do realize that Matsuri-san would kill me if you had stayed dead, right?" The words, "You're right. Consider yourself lucky she didn't kill you anyway after she saw I was asleep," seemed to make Gaara smirk. "Jokes aside, why did you want to see me in private?" he asked abruptly, becoming serious. "It's about Konoha and Suna, Arrow. Sennin gave me only one order in the entire 3 years he was training me and I intend to fulfill it," Naruto said, sitting up straighter and aware that the office was surrounded by a soundproof barrier. He became increasingly shocked as the blonde continued to explain what it meant. He was stunned and said, "You're serious about this?" Naruto replied, "Very. It's the one mission I plan on completing other than becoming Hokage and I need your support." "Alright, but this will change the way the world works if you accomplish this particular mission. You do realize that?" was Gaara's response after he briefly considered the idea and weighed its advantages and disadvantages. "Yeah, it'll be great," the blonde said, nodding with a foxy smile. No end to jutsu flashback as the two teams prepared to depart. He extended his hand to Naruto and said, "Until next time, Uzumaki." "It's Namikaze actually," Naruto said, smiling and shaking the Kazecage's hand before drawing him near and whispering in his ear. "Bye Gaara. Try not to get into any trouble while we're away," Gaara said, pulling away and giving him a startled look. The Kazekage nodded as his features returned to normal, and the words, "Same could be said for you," caused some people in the room to snicker. The blonde let out a sigh and pouted. "True," he said with another smile before turning to go. He uttered the words, "It can't be helped though," behind his back. As Gaara and his siblings watched the two teams leave for home in the desert, they said nothing. However, halfway through, Guy insisted on carrying Kakashi after noticing that he appeared worn out from prolonged use of his Sharingan. The scene that ensued was likely one of the most upsetting things the two teams had ever had to see. However, that's a tale for another time. Fire Nation. Hokage's office, Konoha. Mission accomplished, proudly declared Kakashi. Why wouldn't he be proud of 2 of his former students who had vanquished a demon lord on their own, even if it was only a replica? Tsunade leaned back in her chair and said, "I can see that," as she reviewed 2 teams. "It's a shame you weren't able to kill both of them, but I guess it can't be helped." At least we have one less S-class criminal to deal with. Kakashi said, "Thank you Hokage." Sama, grinning broadly and using his heart genjutsu. You too, I have never heard of a pair of ninja doing something so. Tsunade trailed off, trying to find the word, as she turned to Sakura and Naruto, who were doing their best not to smile, as the genjutsu vanished. Clever? Asked Naruto. Brilliant? Said Sakura. Tsunade's expression became reckless and hardened. She deadpanned and said, "You could have gotten yourselves and your teams killed with that little stunt." With Lee stuttering, but Hokage. Sama, if we had done nothing then who knows what that monster would have done. Everyone appeared to back off at that point. The Hokage leaned forward and scowled at the two teams, namely Sakura and Naruto, saying, "The council seems to agree with you. They consider the matter closed however, I don't. If any of you try something like that again I will demote you or even take away your ninja license." Sakura said, "Sorry Shisho," lowering her head a little, "it won't happen again." Naruto said, "Yeah, I'm sorry too, Obeken," with a depression. "It was my plan so I'll take responsibility." The words, "Don't worry about it, just don't let it happen again," seemed to calm Tsunade down. "Team Guy, you're dismissed," she said with a sigh and a wave of her hand. One team stayed behind and said, "Okay, let's move on to more important things." The other team bowed before departing. Kakashi raised his only visible eyebrow and said, "Hokage, Sama?" As she gazed at the man with the gray hair, the Hokage smiled and said, "Kakashi, if you recall correctly, the Elemental Royal Ball is taking place here in Konoha next week." What? The man stammered and backed up, frantically waving his hands. "Not again. I'll never go to that thing again. Especially after what happened last time," he said. Without knowing what it was, Naruto questioned, "What's the Elemental Royal Ball?" The smirk of Tsunade widened into, "It's a dance where the most top-ranking officials in the elemental countries gather for a day to celebrate the end of the last great ninja war. Even you attends though they refuse to stand next to anyone from Konoha." Confused, Sakura questioned, "What does this have to do with us?" Tsunade sighed, "As the apprentices of the Sannin and Kakashi being the Yondaime's sole surviving student you all qualify as high-ranking officials." Naruto growled, "Wait, I'm not a politician," as the two stared in surprise. Tsunade allowed the smile to transform into a savage grin. "Well, you'd better learn how to be one fast," she said. "Because anyone the Hokage personally takes to the ball is recognized as a Hokage candidate whether the council approves or not." Sakura's eyes widened, and the two teenagers simply stared. What? Kakashi explained, "She's saying that if she takes you to the ball then you are automatically identified as a candidate for Rokudame Hokage." Before he took a seat at one of the seats and held his head. "I remember the last time I went. I'm not allowed to wear my mask when I go. I'm just thankful the fangirls in that ballroom don't try to rape me. I already know Kakashi doesn't want the job. He's already turned down the Godem and Rokudame positions several times before," Tsunade said with a grin. "That leaves you too." It didn't even take Sakura a moment to think, "Thanks, but no, I don't think I could handle the paperwork." Naruto asked, a little taken aback, "You're pulling one over the council again aren't you?" And she said, "You clever little," with a joyful smile. "Not that it matters but it is required for a candidate to have a rival for the position like Minato and Orochimaru or Sarutobi Sensei and Danzo." Tsunade replied, "So it will be you too since I know Kakashi doesn't want the job. This is also to maintain the balance in the village. If the village leader is ever injured or on a mission involving village security then the second candidate is to take charge. If anything were to happen to me, Jiraiya would automatically be in charge as he is the Godem Hokage's second candidate," she said, gesturing to the now open window. Naruto remarked, "Yeah, he's the only one still sane too, well as far as a perverted old man goes." The self-described super pervert questioned from the window, "I heard about your mission. You still have some work to do on that jutsu of yours. Is that any way to talk about your godfather?" The blonde glared at him and said, "Well, Dad was never able to finish it, but I'll get there. Is this dance your idea?" The statement, actually it was Tsunade's though to be honest I'm surprised I didn't think of it, was made by Jiraiya, who appeared ashamed. At that, Sakura rolled her eyes and said, "Okay, I'll do the job even though I don't want it. This is a formal thing right Shisho?" she asked, bowing before turning to go, but she stopped at the door. Tsunade nodded, "Looks like I'll have to shop for a new dress. I've got to tell Ino.Pig, and she cheerfully departed. Naruto muttered, "Girls are strange," and Jiraiya put a hand on his shoulder. Inquiringly, he said, "Yeah, we all know," to the young man. "You're going to wear that for this, aren't you?" "It's the only thing I got that's formal," the blonde said, looking sheepish and nodding. "This is going to be an interesting week," Kakashi said with a sideways glance. Fire Country. Southern Gates, Konoha looking down at himself, Naruto questioned, "Why does this thing not have any orange in it?" as he and his group made their way down the street toward the gate, drawing some strange looks from the locals. You might wonder, why were they examining the team? The group wasn't wearing their typical clothes, mostly, so there's a reason for that. For instance, the team's pink-haired Kunoichi wore a medium-sized pink-red dress that hung down to her knees and exposed some of her now feminine cleavage at the top. Even though she covered it with a dark pink cloak, the guys still hogged her. They wouldn't attempt anything, though, especially with her teammates walking next to her. To the astonishment of his former students, Kakashi was not wearing his mask while wearing his Anbu captain uniform and carrying a sword strapped to his back. Any woman between the ages of 20 and 40 would naturally blush a great deal at this. He laughed uneasily as the three passed another group of women who were staring at him and laughing like schoolgirls. Then there was the blonde, who was dressed in a green tunic and had the master sword fastened to his side with metal straps. However, his red trench coat, which he continued to wear, covered most of it. His hair was out of his hite, which he usually used to hold it in place, and he was wearing the Hokage's pendant on the outside of his top. Any girl younger than 20 was looking at him with barely controlled lust, and for some reason, even though Sakura wouldn't acknowledge it, she was upset with them. Note: imagine a red trench coat, wearing link with whisker lines. All of the villagers were waiting at the gates when the three arrived. The elders, the shinobi council, and the civilian council were in front of them, while the remaining members of Team Ebisu and Konoha 11 were in front of them, all of them wearing rather ornate clothing. When Team Kakashi saw that Tsunade was in front of the group, clad in the Hokage robes and hat, with Jiraiya by her side, they greeted them and joined them. "That tunic, take away the trench coat and you'd have a..." Tenten shook her head, trying to erase the image. There's no way he could be the hero of legend. That's when she saw it. The green tunic. Note: I'm making this up as I go along because it was written before any of the other cages were introduced. Soon after, representatives from the various nations began to arrive. The Fire Daimyo was the first to arrive because his nation was hosting this year's royal ball. Next came the Sandaime Mizukage and the Water Daimyo, who seemed unwilling to speak and simply nodded his head at Tsunade before the two were led, accompanied by their personal guards, to the hotel where they would be staying. But before they left, Naruto thought he saw the Mizukage briefly show interest in him before proceeding. The blonde dismissed it and had to wait little for the next three to show up. Gaara, the Kazekage, his sister Temari, and the Wind Daimyo came next. The Earth Daimyo and the recently reinstated Rokudame Tsuchikage were the next group to arrive, and they caused quite a stir. For starters, the Tsuchikage was a woman, or more specifically, a 16-year-old girl with violet eyes and long brown hair who was a little mischievous. Kiba, like nearly every other male there, muttered, "I think I'm in love," while attempting to keep himself in check. A certain maelstrom thought at random, "Damn, she could give the princess a run for her money in the looks department." Since Obeken is watching him, I think Ero Sennin is drooling, but he isn't. Tsunade said, "Welcome to Konoha Tsuchikage." Dono, after being perplexed. "I hadn't realized that a new Tsuchikage had been elected." "Not surprising really. We recently came under attack by a group of ninja of unknown origin wearing red cloaks and my predecessor fell in battle, which led to me as the most likely candidate for Rokudame Tsuchikage to be instated by my council as the new Tsuchikage. Pardon me for my digression. My name is Takahashi Akira," she said, nodding her head. The Hokage nodded back and began introducing the clan heirs. "Senju Tsunade," he said. "Behind me are the heirs to the most powerful clans in Konoha. Hyuga Hinata, the heir to the Hyuga main house. Hyuga Neji, the heir to the Hyuga branch house, Konoha's weapons mistress. Tenten." The young lady blushed when she said to her, "Next we have Konoha's taijutsu master. Rock Lee, the Inuzuka clan. Heir. Inuzuka Kiba. After that we have the heir to the Aburame clan. Aburame Shino, Konoha's best strategist. Nara Shikamaru, our frontline mind. Walker. Yamanaka Ino and the heir to the Akamichi clan. Akamichi Choji." Before deciding on Team Kakashi, the Tsuchikage examined them, asking, "And who might these be?" Tsunade grinned as she announced that they're the candidates for Rokudame Hokage, and defeated Konoha's council once more. "I believe you already know the copy. Nin. Kakashi, since he's made quite a reputation being the only surviving student of the Yondaime Hokage and mastering over 1,000 jutsus, she added, causing the civilian council to flip and prepare to protest. The girl. Haruno Sakura is my personal apprentice and the best medic. Nin to walk this earth since the death Kakashi's team. Mate. Rin and the Yondaime's wife. And the last but certainly not least is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. The only child of Namikaze Minato and his wife Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina and has surpassed both in the arts of sealing, chakra, and elemental manipulation, said the civilian council, who went white with fear. With the exception of Team Kakashi, everyone froze at that point. Even the Konoha 11 were staring at their former classmate with complete surprise, while Shikamaru and Shino appeared unsurprised. The civilian council, along with the majority of the villagers, both civilians and shinobi, were openly staring in shock, as if they had just been exposed to a huge newsflash. In utter innocence, the boy simply stood there trembling and scratching the back of his head, asking, "What? You didn't figure it out yet?" However, two of the Tsuchikage's personal guards charged at him before anyone could react, shouting, "Die yellow flash!" One of the men screamed as they drew a kunai. When Akira yelled, "Kenji, Shin, what the hell do you think you're doing?" and attempted to stop him, the wind blew, sending them both hurtling backward and colliding with the enormous gate. "Wait. What?" everyone exclaimed, realizing that there were two people standing where the blonde was. Yugito grinned and pulled her leg back after giving the Iwa Nin that had collided with it a vicious kick, saying, "I see hero, I'm still getting into trouble." Naruto rolled his eyes, pulled his arm back, and turned to face the two Iwa bodyguards. "Well, excuse me, princess," he said. "You know it's still against the law to attack me while inside of the village walls. Remember that next time and there won't be a problem." The Tsuchikage turned and gave the two a stern look. "There won't be a next time," she said. "What the hell were you thinking? Never mind. I don't want to know. Just head back to Iwa before I castrate you both." One of the men attempted self-defense by saying, But Tsuchikage. Sama, we were only trying to kill the—" "I don't care. Get out of my sight now," Akira interrupted, and the two scurried off. "I apologize for that, Namikaze-san. It won't happen again," she said with a sigh as she relaxed and bowed her head. "Don't worry. I'm used to it," the Fox Flash said, dismissing it abruptly. They turned and said, "Sorry we're late," as the Raikage and his brother, accompanied by the Lightning Daimyo, entered through the gates. "We ran into a little trouble along the border, nothing too serious." Naruto had been aware of his fiancée's engagement for a while, but that didn't make things any easier. That's when he noticed what she was wearing. He had repeatedly visited Kumo on his training trips over the years, and despite the fact that it was well known that he had numerous sexual partners, he never had more than one. Except for Yugito, they were all one-night stands. He was drawn to her again and again for some reason. She was similar to him, but she didn't sleep with just anyone who caught her eye the way he did. In any case, she was dressed formally for the event, just like everyone else. She wore a dark purple cloak with the kanji for Kumo's Wildcat printed on the back, a long pink dress, and her hair down past her shoulders. Naturally, this made the majority of men swoon and the majority of women angry with her, especially since she chose to wear her family necklace, which coincidentally rested between her two enormous mounds. Note: imagine Zelda wearing a purple cloak over her dress. The greeting was, "Welcome to Konoha Raikage, Dono," said Tsunade. The man said, "I trust you've heard of my granddaughter, Ni Yugito?" as he nodded and pointed to the young woman tugging on our hero's arm. Surprisingly, Sakura, Hinata, and Tenten were all wondering, who the hell is this hussy? From the sidelines. After directing the other two cages, Tsunade said, "Okay, please follow me. You'll be staying in the Golden Leaf Hotel with the other officials." Jiraiya yelled, everyone dismissed, and the crowd began to thin out. "Yugito-chan," said the grandfather of the young lady. "Is there anything you need, grandfather?" Yugito asked, turning to face the Raikage. "Go on and enjoy yourself," the elderly man said, shaking his head and waving her away. "You too, Naruto," Jiraiya gestured. Naruto said, "Come on, princess. I know a good ramen. Stand nearby," and he began to move. Her words were, "Hey, wait up," as she ran after him. When Jiraiya said, "She actually reminds me of you, Tsunade," she was amused. Gazing at the young blonde, Tsunade questioned, "Jiraiya, exactly who is that girl?" "He hasn't told you. She's his fiancée, the Gamma," Senin said, raising an eyebrow at her. Three female voices reverberated throughout the village as the Konoha 11's jaws dropped to the ground. "What? This time. As they sat down at Ichiraku, Naruto's favorite ramen stand, he asked, "Did you hear something?" Yugito sighed and shook her head when she smelled the food she desired. "I don't think so," she said. "Hey old man. 2 bowls of miso ramen on the double," exclaimed Naruto, shrugging. After finishing the meal, the chef said, coming right up Naruto, and served 2 brand new bowls. When Yugito tasted it for the first time, her eyes glazed over and she smiled blissfully. Naruto merely said, "I told you this place was better than the one in Kumo," as she began to shovel the food down. Fire Country. Hokage Tower Ballroom in Konoha. In frustration, Naruto muttered, "I still think it'd look better with a bit of orange in it," as the 3-man team made their way to the ballroom's entrance. He complains, "I mean come on. I hate wearing this thing. It's not as comfortable as the jumpsuit," as he looks at his green tunic. Sighing, Naruto, "You've got to get used to it. I hate these gathering more than anything, and I mean anything, but I try not to complain." The blonde reflected, "Well, at least I still get to wear my trench coat." Since the officials arrived, Sakura had been unusually quiet, and neither of her teammates knew why, so they chose not to confront her. When the 3 of them walked into the room, they noticed that it was packed with people, especially members of Konoha's council. On the stage, a 4-person band was performing while they conversed among themselves. The room was huge, nearly filling a whole floor of the tower, and bustling with activity. After entering, the group dispersed, with Kakashi attempting to avoid his fangirls, Sakura moving to sit next to Shizune and Ino, and Naruto getting a drink from the bar stand where Jiraiya was sitting and downing cup after cup of sake. Naruto sat down next to his godfather and said, "Hey Ero." Sennin, calling out to the bartender, "Please, some sake." The bartender said, "Coming right up Namikaze sama," and then brought him a cup. After downing another cup, the Gamma, Sennin inquired, "Are you enjoying the party, brat?" With a sigh, the blonde teenager drained his drink and said, "It's okay, but I hate these formal things." With an eyebrow raised, Jiraiya questioned, "Should you be drinking?" "Yeah right. Like the furball would ever let me get drunk at something like this," Naruto replied with a laugh. "Well, it does happen," his sensei remarked, recalling how it happened. "It happened once and we were at a nightclub. What was the harm in him going to sleep?" snorted Naruto in irritation. "He disabled your unnatural healing, allowing you to get drunk, and you ended up in bed with 4 girls your age and 2 women. Do you know how many men would kill to be in that position?" Jiraiya deadpanned. "A lot?" asked the blonde jounin, with a nervous laugh. "You know, we haven't seen Yugito Hime in over a month," Jiraiya said with a simple sigh. When the blonde said, "Yeah, surprised me when I saw her at the gates," a tiny smile appeared on his lips. After finishing another drink, the Gamma, Sennin said, "Kid, you have a damn strange taste in women. You must have a mother complex or something." With a scowl, his pupil asked, "And what's that supposed to mean?" First Sakura-san looks and acts a hell of a lot like Kushina-chan, just with pink hair and a little more violent, Jiraiya said, waving him away. "And now Yugito Hime, who might I add is almost identical to what Tsunade once was in every way," he said, smiling at him before throwing a chuckle. "Oh, and how's that?" sarcastically, Naruto inquired. "Well, she's a granddaughter of a Kage, blonde hair, a fiery temper, and the fact that she uses medical ninjutsu." When he was done, Jiraiya shook his head and said, "I bet you she will look like a younger Tsunade if she wears Kage robes." Naruto shook his head and drained the last of his sake after attempting to visualize it for a few seconds. "Whatever," he said. "It's not like I like her anyways," he said as he got up and moved to the opposite side of the room, where the Hokage was standing and in conversation with the Reikage. The blonde didn't respond and simply continued to walk. "If that's true, how come she's the only girl you've slept with more than once?" He had to circle the crowd in the middle of the floor, but he stopped abruptly and asked, "Is there a reason you're staring at me, Mizukage sama?" while being careful not to talk too loudly to avoid drawing attention to himself. "Don't you, King of Evil, know when I'm around?" The Mizukage, dressed in robes, was standing on the wall with his head pointing to the ground, his hat shielding his face from view. "There's no reason in particular, Namikaze Naruto," he said. "And please, call me Madara," was the first thing that made the fox flash tense. "Please call me Ganondorf, Link, don't be so formal." The blonde heard his tenant say, "Watch what you say around him, Kit," from his cage. "Whatever you do, don't take anything he says at face value." Turning to face the man, Naruto cut off Kyuubi's voice and asked, Then why are you always staring at me every time we cross paths? Madara. Sama? He looked up to see the blonde's face, which was hidden behind a mask. His right eye was in a single eyehole in an orange mask with lines spiraling out of it. Does he wear a mask? Although Naruto had some reservations about this individual, he chose to cooperate for the time being. He's probably scarred or something. Nothing you need to concern yourself with, the Mizukage said with a laugh. Go on. I don't mean to hold you up. Even as he felt the man push off from the wall and begin to head for the exit, Naruto nodded and kept moving forward. He said, we're leaving, as he went by the water daimyo. Asked the water daimyo, Mizukage. Sama? As Naruto left the room, the Mizukage turned to face him and said, I found out what I came to find out. Enjoy your fun, boy, for it shall not last forever, was displayed on the back of his right hand, which was blazing with a faint red triad symbol. The two triangles were glowing brighter than the others. Yugito narrowed his eyes and watched the man leave, thinking, who the hell is he? How come he looks so familiar? The Reorganizing said to the young man, Naruto-kun, enjoying yourself? Naruto said, yeah, it's great, it could do with a few adjustments, but I can definitely see the potential. You'd rather be at a nightclub, the elderly man said with a laugh. Never mind that. What is it you wanted, my boy? The blonde jounin said, nervously scratching his cheek but not denying it. Naruto said, I have something to discuss with you, Reorganizing. Sama, merely aware that other people were present. If it's about Jiraiya Dono's mission for you, then there is no need to explain. He already told me about it and you have my full support, the Reorganizing said with a wise smile. Tsunade scowled as she glanced between the two, asking, what mission? They haven't told you. I suppose Jiraiya Dono and Naruto-kun will just have to tell you later, the Reorganizing said, raising an eyebrow at her. Oh dear me, it must be time. That was fast, was the reaction when the music began to become slower than it had been. Care to dance, Tsunade? Jiraiya asked, looking irritated, but she didn't say no as he led her out onto the dance floor. Everyone else in the room was choosing a partner to dance with. A certain princess caught Sakura's attention as she was ready to approach our blonde hero. Yugito asked, are you just going to stand there or are you going to dance? Care to dance, milady? Naruto asked, rolling his eyes and extending his hand in a small bow. Lead the way, Sir Knight, she said, smiling and putting her hand in his. In the center of the room, where everyone else was dancing with their partners, he led her to the dance floor. Everyone, including Yugito and Naruto, was dancing to the slow song, which I believe to be the waltz. I got the best advice from my best friend. Every day is a gift, not a given right, he said. Do everything you can and let go of your worries. And make an effort to choose the less traveled route. The longest stride is the one you take initially. If today was your last day, it was too late for tomorrow. Could you bid yesterday farewell? Would you live every second as if it were your last? Keep outdated photos in the past. Give away all of your money? If today was your last day, it should be a way of life to go against the grain. The fight is always worthwhile when the reward is worth it. Since there isn't a second chance, every second matters. Thus, live each day as if it were your first. Avoid taking advantage of others in your own life. If today was your last day, it was too late for tomorrow. Could you bid yesterday farewell? Would you live every second as if it were your last? Keep outdated photos in the past. View additional lyrics at ZLLV. Give away all of your money? Would you call long lost friends? Bring back old memories. Would you pardon your adversaries? Would you discover the one you've been dreaming about? Make a vow to God above and below, that you fall in love at last. If today was your last day, would you mend a broken heart to leave your mark? You are aware that there is always time to aim high. Whatever your identity, do whatever it takes, then. Because there are no moments in this life that can be undone. Don't let anything get in your way, because time never works in your favor. If today was your last day, it was too late for tomorrow. Could you bid yesterday farewell? Would you live every second as if it were your last? Keep outdated photos in the past. Give away all of your money? Would you call long lost friends? Bring back old memories? Would you pardon your adversaries? Would you discover the one you've been dreaming about? Make a vow to God above and below, that you fall in love at last. If today was your last day, Sakura spent the evening dancing with Lee, but he kept glancing at her teammate and his fiancé, asking if he had truly moved on from her. Fire Country. Hokage Tower, Konoha. After several hours, everyone began to depart, and eventually, only the hosts of the party remained. After everyone had left, the room was locked, and Tsunade would assign genin teams to clean it over the course of the following few days. When Team Kakashi eventually left, it was late. Sakura abruptly stopped as they were making their way down the hallway to the staircase. When she finally began to speak, her two teammates were taken aback because she hadn't spoken to them the entire time. Naruto? They asked. Something wrong, Sakura-chan? Said the blonde as he turned to face her and noticed that she had stopped. Sensei, I need to speak to Naruto alone, she said to Kakashi after biting her lower lip for a moment. Since he was still wearing his hite over his left eye, he raised the only eyebrow that was visible. He continued, all right. See you both tomorrow, a little concerned for his former pupils. As she took his hand and dragged him into a nearby Hokage's office, Naruto asked in confusion, what did you want to talk to me about, Sakura-chan? Naruto, I have some questions and I'd like some answers, please, she said, turning around and taking a deep breath before shutting the door behind her. Unbelievably, his expression hardened. All right. Ask but I might not answer, was his way of saying that he didn't like discussing himself or anyone concerned. Do you still love me? She asked, nodding and inhaling deeply. The room was incredibly quiet, especially because there were no lights on and she could see his face clearly in the moonlight coming in through the window. He gave an honest response, saying, I don't know anymore, Sakura-chan. With sadness, she inquired, what about Sasuke? Naruto nearly moaned, not even realizing she had overlooked the kun at the end of the emo's name. It's always about Sasuke. I still intend to bring him back. Why? Chunin, who had pink hair, appeared to be fighting back tears. It was just because I made a promise, he said. You'll never change, at least not completely, she says, shaking her head and sniffing after a few minutes of silence. Sakura-chan, what are you? He started, but she cut his thoughts short by slamming her lips against his. I shouldn't have done that, she said as she withdrew in a panic a few seconds later. When she opened her eyes, she saw that Naruto was the one kissing her. She closed her eyes and melted into the kiss, and before she knew it, the two of them were in the Namikaze household's main bedroom, flashing yellow. When Naruto returned from his training trip 2 weeks ago, he had just moved in. Normally, however, he would simply use shadow clones to carry items to the house. Nonetheless, he discovered a few items strewn about the house, including a photo of his parents. The blonde placed her on the bed and withdrew, but it was a mistake because she leapt in an instant. Place imagination here. Fire country. Namikaze residence, Konoha. Feeling positively exhausted, Naruto opened his eyes slowly. When he was fully conscious, he attempted to stand up but was restrained by something, in this case Sakura's head, which was holding him down by the chest. Before spinning his legs over the side of the bed and letting out a sigh as he recalled everything that had transpired over the previous 2 weeks, he carefully moved out of her grasp, being careful not to wake her. How on earth did we end up in this situation? Why couldn't we? To observe the indicators that we overlooked. Additionally, attempt to reverse the roles. I hope you will relax your fists. Additionally, unpack your bag. There has been far too much of this lately. Do not believe it is too late. There is nothing wrong. As long as you are aware that I will eventually, somehow I will make it okay, but not just yet. You're probably wondering when, only you are aware of that. Eventually, somehow I will make it okay, but not just yet. You're probably wondering when, since we're here anyhow. I hope that we might say things that have always been necessary to say. Therefore, we might wind up stringing this as how the story has now unfolded. Similar to a paperback book, let's revise a conclusion that makes sense. Rather than a Hollywood horror, there is nothing wrong. As long as you are aware that I will eventually, somehow I will make it okay, but not just yet. You're probably wondering when, only you are aware of that. Eventually, somehow I will make it okay, but not just yet. You're probably wondering when, only you are aware of that. Solo, how on earth did we end up in this situation? Why couldn't we to observe the indicators that we overlooked? Additionally, attempt to reverse the roles. This is how the story has now unfolded. Similar to a paperback book, let's revise a conclusion that makes sense. Rather than a Hollywood horror, there is nothing wrong. As long as you are aware that I will eventually, somehow I will make it okay, but not just yet. You're probably wondering when, only you are aware of that. Eventually, somehow I will make it okay, but not just yet. You're probably wondering when, only you are aware of that. You're probably wondering when, only you are aware of that. You're probably wondering when Sakura shifted slightly, putting her head on one of the pillows and curling into a ball. After a few seconds of staring at her, he felt a headache coming on and grabbed his head. "Hey Malin. You want to go ride a pona? Maybe later, Link. I still have to feed the animals." "Sure thing. I'll wait." After shaking his head and turning to face the girl, Naruto's eyes widened when he noticed the image of a red-haired girl superimposed on her body. He was shaking once more when he noticed that Sakura appeared to be herself once more. Damn voices again. Note: no, he is not insane. "I need some air. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," the blonde said as he got up and changed into his regular clothes. "You go get Sakura-chan some cloths to wear. Those things from last night aren't worth the trouble of her putting them on just for her to change when she gets home. As for you, you stay here in case she wakes up," he said, commanding two clones to appear. They nodded and obeyed as he left the house through the front door. He kept thinking about the discussion he had with Jiraiya about Yugito the night before as he was walking. Flashback. "Jutsu does not start. It's not like I like her anyway," said the blonde as she got to her feet. He made his way to where the Hokage was standing and conversing with the Reikage on the opposite side of the room. "If that's true, how come she's the only girl you've slept with more than once?" Flashback. No ends to Jutsu. He shook his head and continued to walk, saying, "There's no denying it, this situation with Sakura-chan proves it." He glanced back at the house and said, "Sakura-chan, Yugito, I'm a demon, so I can't afford to be happy like that, even though I adore Yugito-chan. Especially now." Hardened his eyes and his thoughts turned to the Akatsuki. "So Madara, you're hiding in plain sight?" Kyuubi asked, laughing fearfully, as a huge, hideous creature with 9 swishing tails appeared in the deepest corner of one mindscape. "I wonder what the kid would do if he found out about you," Kyuubi asked. "I wonder what he would do if he found out about everything," the fox said, glancing at the small golden door next to the chamber's entrance. The door had a triad symbol on it, with the lower right triangle glowing a faint green. Fire Country. Nara residence. Konoha. 2 days had passed since the elemental royal ball, and while some officials, like the Reikage and the Tsuchikage, remained, the majority had left. All of the girls had gathered earlier that day and spent the day at the hot springs, while the Konoha 11 boys sat around a large table in the Nara home's living room playing poker. They had no missions. With wide eyes, Kiba questioned, "You did what? When?" "She kissed me right after the ball, and the next thing I know, I wake up in bed the next morning with her beside me," Naruto said, letting out a sigh and leaning back in his chair. Kiba asked lustfully, "So was she any good?" before Naruto, Shikamaru, and Choji knocked him down. The blonde snarled, "Not a word, dog." Breath, while Shino shuffled the cards. The bug user declared, "You seem perplexed," and began setting cards on the table in front of everyone. As he picked up his cards, Naruto said, "Girl is the last thing I need right now, especially with Akatsuki now active." Suddenly, the room's temperature dropped. "You mean because of Kyuubi?" "It was an order, not a request." "Who told you?" Shikamaru's statement, "No one." All of the Konoha 11 found out on their own, along with half the kids our age and under, did not appear to surprise anyone in the room. For a brief moment, the blonde said, "And you don't hate me?" Shino said, "Namikaze-san," after distributing the cards. "No one in Konoha cares who or what you were, and if they did they would most likely remain silent." Choji remarked, "Yeah man, the proof is right here after all," in between bites of his chips. "You're sitting at a table playing cards with your friends." The fox Flash smiled and showed off his cards, saying, "And winning, read and weep boys." As he looked over the cards, Kiba snarled, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." Straight flush. Yugito, Tamari, Akira, and the girls of the Konoha 11 sat in the hot springs across town. Tenten smirked in amusement and said, "You slept with him? Well, I suppose I would as well with a body like his." With an ear-to-ear lustful smile, Ino approached her and inquired, "Well, how big was he?" Suddenly, Sakura's cheeks turned red, but it wasn't from the hot spring. She simply made a measurement with her hair fingers, making the majority of the girls there blush intensely, without responding. A certain Hyuga heiress whispered, "It's bigger than the last time I saw it," but everyone heard, and they all turned to look at the bashful girl. "Why.uh? Heard T? That?" they asked. Loud and clear. The shy girl yelled as Ino pulled her into an embrace and said, "Now tell us how you know that little detail." M.my circa clan U. Uses T.the B by Kugan T.top. Peepi.ino. On page people, I'm N.noe. Exception, was Hinata's response, despite her lack of enthusiasm. Your entire clan? Please tell me you don't mean Neji-kun too, do you? Tenten broke the golden silence, but all she received was a nod. Why that little? I'll castrate him. If he wanted to see me naked he could have just asked, the weapon's mistress said, presumably growling. Wait. That didn't come out right, was her reaction when she realized that everyone was now staring at her. No, I think we got the gist of it, Tamari said, covering her mouth to contain her laughter. Tenten narrowed her eyes and said, what about you then, Ms. Windy Desert? Don't call me that, was Tamari's scowl in response to her nickname. My personal life is none of your business, girly, she said with a smile while leaning back on a boulder. Tenten was interrupted, saying, yeah right, Shikamaru-san probably got bored of you and left. Tamari glared and said, he did not, with force. Say something like that again and I'll reintroduce you to my fan. As soon as she said, whatever you say fangirl, the Suna Kunoichi jumped at her. Ino commanded, settle down you two, as the two girls started striking one another. Hinata managed to look at Sakura and ask, it. The Y.ul. Liked S. Sasuke. Chunin, who has pink hair, gave a hesitant, I don't know, response after her eyes appeared to darken. What do you mean you don't know? Ino narrowed her eyes and said, you had better not say something like you slept with Naruto because you couldn't get Sasuke. The words, I know for a fact that Baka hates being thought of as second best to that traitor, caused Sakura's eyes to widen toward her. Sakura said, I never thought of him that way, as if the idea were depressing. Before anyone spoke again for a few minutes, Hinata stammered, y.u and n Naruto.kun a circa couple n now? I think so. I mean he's always liked me in the past and tried getting me to go out with him all the time, so I suppose we are a couple now, replied the girl with pink hair. Oh, that's hilarious, was the echoing laugh that abruptly cut off the conversation. With her eyes narrowed, Sakura asked, what's so funny? Yugito, sitting cross-legged and wearing a towel around her, looked up on top of a nearby boulder and was hardly able to contain her laughter. The fact that just from the fact that you slept with him makes you think you're dating him. If you think that, then I'm sorry to say you were mistaken, she said, laughing once more. Resisting the urge to spit, Sakura asked, what do you know, Cloud? Girl. The Kumo nin simply smiled and said, you can't give him what he needs. Someone like you could never understand him. Sakura scowled and said, oh yeah, and what does he need? I know, everything. Yugito said, I don't have to tell you, and his smile faded. Just don't think for a second that he's still a naive boy who will wait on your hand and foot. There was silence and tension in the air. Am I interrupting something? Shizune asked as she entered fully clothed and looked around. When the group remained silent, she went on, Team Kakashi, Team Guy, and Yugito-san are to report to the Hokage's office now. It's an urgent order from both Hokage Sama and Reikage Sama. Tenten said, okay, let's get out of here, and got up to leave. Shizune said, also, can you find your team mates? I can't find them anywhere, as Sakura and Yugito stopped glaring at one another and started to walk away. Tenten nodded, sure, and he and Sakura and Yugito headed for the changing rooms. Returning to the boys. Sorry guys. It looks like I win again. Four of a kind, is how our blonde hero smiled as he dropped his cards on the table. And they're all kings, complained Kiba. That's it, I'm out, Shikamaru said, tossing his cards onto the table and leaning back. Choji said, me too, and opened a second bag of chips. Gambling is most unyouthful, Lee said, suppressing a disgusted expression as Naruto drew the cash closer to him. Kiba yelled, you're kidding me. You can't quit, before turning to face his teammate. Shino, you're not quitting, are you? The bug. User simply said, no, I think I am enjoying this game, pointing to the enormous quantity of Ryo he had won. Can't I win just one round? You two are always winning. How is it even possible to get 5 royal flushes in 3 hours? The Inuzuka sighed with annoyance. Come on, one more round. Sure. I'm in, after throwing some Ryo in the center of the table, Naruto said. Remember Neji? Nope, Byakugan, and Shino, Neji, and Kiba followed. I told you I will not use the Byakugan to cheat, the Hyuga Jonin glared at the blonde. Naruto grinned and used a sunshine genjutsu behind him. Just making sure, he said. We wouldn't want Tenten-chan finding out about what you use those eyes of yours for outside of combat, do we? Shikamaru and Choji laughed, and Neji swallowed. He pretended to be ignorant when he said, I don't know what you're talking about. Even after the Sunshine Genjutsu deactivated and Kiba began distributing the cards, the blonde simply continued to smile like a fox. "Sure you don't," she said. "Knock, knock, I'll get it," was the group's alarm when they heard the unexpected noise at the door. "Hello ladies, come on in," Lee said as he walked over to the door and opened it. Tenten, Sakura, and Yugito joined Lee in the room a moment later. When the weapons mistress said, "Lee.kun, Naruto, Neji.kun, Hokage, Sama wishes to speak with us." Naruto waved his hand dismissively and looked at his cards. "In a minute," he said. "I call," Kiba said with a gleeful smile before tossing some cash into the middle. Shino said in a monotone, "Fold," and he put his cards face down. "No, Byakugan Neji," was Neji's strong temptation to spy on his opponent's cards. After giving the blonde a fierce look, the Hyuga Jonin put his money in the middle. "I call," he said, his eyes narrowing. Guys." Tenten was starting to grow irritated at their disregard for her. "Flush," Neji said, grinning slightly as he displayed his cards. Kiba put down his cards and cheered, "Have some of that," which made Neji complain. "Four of a kind's kings, beat that Namikaze." Naruto simply put his cards down and grinned like a fox, saying, "You shouldn't underestimate me. Sorry, Kiba, royal flush." Kiba let out a frustrated, "God damn it," scream. Naruto said, "Don't take it personally, dog," breath, while he was already standing. Kiba snarled, "I'll get you next time," while Lee and Neji stood up as well. "Anytime, anywhere." As he and Neji, Lee, and the girls left the room, Naruto waved and said, "The outcome will still be the same." "What does Hokage Sama require of us this youthful day?" Lee inquired as they were outside the house. Shizune.san didn't say, is the shrug the girls give as they take off for the Hokage tower on the rooftops. As the group touched down at the front door, Neji remarked, "Well, it looks like we're about to find out." They entered and, following a conversation with the secretary, ascended to the Hokage's office. "Knock, knock," they heard someone say, "Come in," and went inside. Tsunade sat at her desk, saying, "Good you're all here," as the Reikage, Tsuchikage, Karabi, Kakashi, Guy, and a man wearing Anbu gear and a mask entered the room. Tenten struck Naruto in the head after he asked, "You wanted to see us, Obaken?" Its mistress snarled, "Don't call Hokage Sama that," in support of her hero. As she observed the group, Tsunade sighed, "Never mind that, we need to get down to business." "Settle down now. We have some news for you all," the Reikage said, chuckling slightly. With a suspicious tone, Yugito said, "What news, grandfather?" "Yugito Chan," the elderly Kage said with a smile, "You'll be joining a Konoha team as part of joint effort against Akatsuki." The Kumo Jonin froze in shock, asking, "What? Why? Keeping you in a single village is just asking the Akatsuki for trouble, so you'll be joining a strike team to fight them," the Reikage said knowingly. "I know you don't like it, but it's safer than if you stay in Kumo at the moment." Neji politely inquired, "If I may ask, if she's joining Team Kakashi, then why are we here, Hokage Sama?" Tsunade nodded her head, "She isn't joining Team Kakashi because there is no Team Kakashi. I have disbanded both Team Kakashi and Team Guy." Naruto, Sakura, Lee, and Tenten nearly yelled, "What?" She said, "The teams are being reorganized," as she reclined in her seat. "Akatsuki is becoming an increasing threat. The attack on the Kazekage is proof of that, and with Otokagure on the rise, it won't be long before everyone's at each other's throats and the fourth great shinobi war will begin." Tenten was able to ask, "Are you joking, Hokage Sama?" as the teenage nins just stared in stunned silence. The Reikage was the one to respond. "The tension between the nations has been building for many years now, and Akatsuki is causing more tension and panic each passing day. At the current pace of decline in negotiations, and considering all of the nations are picking sides, the next war will happen within the next year or two." In order to get their attention, the Hokage said, "As of right now, I'm putting together a frontline team for the exclusive purpose of dealing with all Akatsuki matters and those of Otokagure. Kakashi, Guy and Neji, I need you three to start training as many batches of genin as you can. 2 years is not a lot of time. Naruto, Sakura, Tenten, and Lee. You will be the new 7-man strike team along with Yamato," she said, gesturing to the man in the Anbu who took off his mask and set it on the table, exposing his face, after the three nodded. "Yugito.san and a boy the elders forced me to assign to the team. His name is Sai." After asking, "A 7-man squad? Don't you think that's a bit much?" Naruto was struck once more. Yugito hissed at him, This is Akatsuki we're talking about. They aren't exactly pushovers, and it turned out that she had struck him this time. The statement, that may be true but with more people there will be a lot more risks involved, was all Naruto gave her. Akira grinned at the blonde and said, I'd have one of my nins in this joint team but Iwa doesn't exactly like Konoha. And almost every Iwa citizen, shinobi or otherwise hate you Namikaze-san. People have hated me since the day I was born, not like a few more will matter, Naruto said, dismissing it with a simple wave. Who's in charge of this team anyways? The blonde glanced. Probably Yamato-san. Sakura lamented. Nope. Not me, the Anbu captain said, tensing up a little before shaking his head. Then who's in charge? The pink-haired Chunin asked, looking at him in surprise. As Tsunade and her grandfather appeared to smile, Yugito became extremely terrified. Oh no. Naruto, Kakashi uttered, his sunshine genjutsu and I smile behind him. Before Tenten said the words, oh shit, that summed up how they all felt, there were a few moments of silence. Together, Sakura and Yugito uttered the words, we're screwed, and as soon as they realized it, they began to glare at one another. Our blonde hero scowled, I'm not that bad, and the team as a whole snorted. Anyway, have we got a mission? Tsunade handed him a scroll, which he unrolled to reveal its contents. Actually yes you do, she said. You are to protect a family of farmers who have recently been getting harassed by several Kiri Newtonans. More of a statement than a query, Naruto's words, hey, wait a minute, I thought you said you made our team for the purpose of fighting Akatsuki. Tsunade gave a wink, you're right. I'm assigning your team this mission specifically because there have been reports that the Akatsuki member Sasori has been spotted nearby with his new partner since you killed his old partner Naruto. Sakura inquired, recalling the fate of Sasori's now deceased grandmother, Chio. Have you got any information on the Nukanen or Sasori's new partner? To which the Tsuchikage replied, just that he's a guy named Tobi. Yugito complained, that's not much to go on. Tsunade said, Sakura, to get her apprentice's attention. I understand that the client is a relative of yours, Haruno Marin? Sakura exclaimed, Marin? Chan? She's my cousin, she owns a farm deep in field country, bewildered. Why would a group Nukanans be harassing her and Uncle Terran? Tsunade said, the mission request didn't say, and shook her head, since you know where she lives then I don't need to worry about giving you directions. The words, of course Shisho. I remember where to go, were affirmed by Sakura's nod. Our blonde hero received another blow to the head when someone asked, is there anything else Obaken? With a laugh, Tsunade waved them away, saying, no, that's all Team Naruto. The new group bowed and walked away. Sakura complained, Team Naruto? We're screwed, as they left the room. With a nervous laugh, Kakashi asked, how do you think they'll do? The Reikage asserted that, they'll be fine, before the others broke their silence. Guy said in a tone appropriate for the situation, if it's okay with you, may I ask Hokage? Sama where Jiraiya? Sama is currently following up one of his leads, he should be back in about a month. Report back here tomorrow to request your genin teams. Tsunade replied, rubbing her eyes before turning to face the three Konoha jounin who were still present in the room. There is never a dull moment here. Country border for fire. Field. Unknown location. With sporadic stops, the new 7-man team had been traveling for more than 2 days before reaching the border. Nevertheless, they rarely took a long break. Prior to their departure from Konoha, Naruto, Sakura, Yugito, and, surprisingly, Tenten had just managed to avoid killing their new teammate, Danzo, who had been chosen by Konoha's former warhawk. The boy. Sai was an obnoxious pain in the ass in every way. He lacked personality and repeatedly insulted them without intending to. The team hadn't been too bad aside from that. Yamato liked to be by himself and showed that he could control the wood element by constructing a wooden house for them to spend the night in. Now that they had read the entire Shoden Hokage story, they understood why Yamato had been put on the team. To stop the two blondes from losing control, even though they both knew they wouldn't. Tenten was always using various weapons and honing her kenjutsu. By sparring with Naruto, Lee challenged him. They used only taijutsu to avoid causing permanent harm, but they still injured each other, and Sakura and Yugito alternated in repairing the wounds they had both received. At the moment, the majority of the team was sleeping on futons they had kept in scrolls, mainly because they are ninja. For what felt like hours, Sakura had climbed to the wooden house's roof and gazed up at the sky. Hey, she said as she swiveled her head to see Naruto leaning against the chimney of the house. What are you doing up here? She replied, just thinking, without averting her gaze from the stars in the clear sky above. The blonde hero put his sword down next to him and said, "What about?" She answered, "Sasuke," despite appearing a little uneasy. "I mean, why are we out here in the middle of nowhere when the reason we've been training for 3 years is in the clutches of Orochimaru?" She asked quickly after noticing the expression that flashed across his face. "There's no point in looking for him since I doubt he wants to be found," he sighed after staring at her for a good long time. Naruto said with a reassuring voice, "I know there isn't much time left before Teme tries to take Sasuke's body, but there's nothing we can do until we find out exactly where he is." For a brief moment, Sakura had a serious expression, "But if we can't find him?" Arrow. Sennin may be a perverted old man, but he knows his stuff. If anyone can find Orochimaru and Sasuke, it would be him, Naruto declared, expressing his sincere belief in the statement. Sakura grinned and said, "You're right. Everything will be okay, Sakura-chan. We'll definitely see the Teme again," Naruto assured her, flashing one of his sly smiles. The pink-haired teen said, "Naruto, I'm sorry," as she briefly closed and then opened her eyes. The blonde gave her a startled look and asked, "What for?" She looked down at the ground as she said, "I was being selfish when I made you that childish promise so long ago, knowing you would do whatever it would take to complete it, even go as far as to take several Chidori wounds to your chest. I read the report and did some research on your jutsu. Rasengan. Kakashi Sensei even said it was superior in every way to the Chidori he invented, meaning that when you clashed with Sasuke using those 2 jutsus, the only way for you to lose would be if you pulled back at the last second, if you let him win. And the only reason you would do something like that would be because you had a promise to keep," Sakura said, looking up into his eyes. "It doesn't matter now. What's done is done and we can't change the past," said Naruto as he stood there with his eyes closed. "We all make mistakes. It's what makes us human," he said with a smile as he looked down at her. "You're right. It's of no use to blame myself," she said, nodding slowly after giving everything some thought. Naruto turned and said, "Come on, let's get some sleep. We've got a big day tomorrow." He nodded and picked up his sword once more. "Hopefully, Marin-chan and her father can distract me from everything. It's almost like a vacation," Sakura said as she stood up a moment later and followed back inside the wooden house. Field location: Haruno Ranch in Fensu Province. As far as the eye could see, the field country was a vast expanse of open land with only a few isolated trees towering over the horizon. Even though it lacked a shinobi village of its own, the mountains and rocks that surrounded the enormous field blocked nearly all access to the nation itself and shielded it from any threat. The country's capital, Karga, was located in the very center of the land, where many farmers had settled. The last time Naruto visited during his vacation, the city was comparatively tranquil. Normally, there would be a lot of activity throughout the entire country, but as the team arrived at the ranch, there was absolute silence. The team's uneasiness stemmed from the fact that it was too quiet. Tenten whispered, "This doesn't feel right," as she slipped a kunai into her hand. As the group went through the main gate, Sakura clenched her fists and peered around. "Last time I was here, the animals were constantly moving around this time of day," she said. "There's nothing here," was accurate. There was no sign of life anywhere. Naruto commanded, "Let's take a look around. Nobody let your guard down," and the group nodded before dispersing. "This place. It looks like it's been cleaned recently," Lee said, checking the stables but finding nothing, not even dust. "Where is everybody?" Sakura asked thoughtfully as she surveyed the sitting room of the house. Using shadow and lightning clones, Naruto and Yugito began exploring the surrounding area. "I've got nothing. You?" Yugito inquired, but Naruto simply shook his head. His gaze returned to the house. "Nothing either, and I can't sense any chakra signatures nearby, civilian or otherwise," he said. Sai shouted, "Naruto! Senpai! I think I have found something," throughout the ranch. When the others reached the master bedroom, Sai was standing in there, outside. They opened the door to find the entire room in ruins, including ripped carpets, a broken mirror, and many other damaged items. "I checked the other rooms. They're all the same except for one," they said. Sakura recognized the room as Marin's, and Sai led them in there to it. The room was essentially the same as the other, but there was one significant difference. A large mirror in the corner had words written in blood on it. "The fields shall be bathed in blood," was written in blood. Quote, comma, quote, quote, comma, quote, quote, comma, quote, quote, comma, quote, quote, comma, quote. The group shook their heads when Naruto asked, "Has anyone found anything else?" "Then we're leaving. Our destination is the nation's capital. Fire Nation." Hokage's office, Konoha. Back in Konoha, Tsunade was just reclining in her chair and glancing between the other people in the room. Surprisingly, Kakashi and Jiraiya sat upright on opposite sides of the office table, with Kakashi missing his orange book and Jiraiya without his notepad. Alright, I'll cut right to the chase. Kakashi, I want a status report on both of your former students' progress, the Hokage said in an even voice. You should know more about Sakura's improvements than I do, but I'll report my analysis anyway, Kakashi said after nodding. He exhaled deeply and kept going. In all honesty, she is very versatile in combat and appeared to be able to hold her own against Sasori for quite some time, even managing to destroy his scorpion puppet with a single blow. When Tsunade said, yes, I read that part of the report on your mission, please continue, Jiraiya shuddered. Under his breath, the Gamma. Sennin muttered, not another one. Tsunade glared at him. Yes, well, and Kakashi kept perspiring. While she may be a very versatile fighter, she didn't show any skills other than her super strength, medical knowledge and taijutsu skill. I'm not entirely sure how she would fare in combat alone. She has also learned a few genjutsu from Kurenai-san for such occasions, but I agree with you, she has the skills. Now all she needs is the experience, Tsunade said after pausing to consider what he had said before nodding. As for Naruto, he's still a knucklehead for charging in blindly on occasion, but he can be very cunning when fighting, Kakashi said after nodding and moving on to his next report. He's still reckless. That's why I appointed him the new team's leader, the Hokage grumbled. Hopefully being in charge of a team will make him realize when not to take risks. Well, anyways, besides overall improvement, his most notable skill is the futon Rasen Shuriken, which even my Sharingan wasn't able to track the amount of times the wind slashed the victim's body, said the copy.nin. Yes, Sakura told me about it. It does damage at the cellular level, effectively killing a person. But this also appears to do the same amount of damage to the user's arm, though to a lesser extent. I'm classifying it as a kinjutsu and Naruto should never use it again, the Hokage said, clenching her fists. I have to cut in here, Tsunade. I think I should tell you it isn't finished, Jiraiya said, coughing, drawing her attention. Tsunade stared at him incredulously and asked, what do you mean it's not finished? Well, his father designed the Rasengan to be a 6-step jutsu. Step 1 is Rasengan. Step 2 is Udama Rasengan. Step 3 is where I am, which is Cho Udama Rasengan. Minato barely reached step 4, which is Futon Rasengan, and as for Naruto, his jutsu is step 5, but it is still not finished since step 6 is the final level of the jutsu and Minato's true vision, Jiraiya clarified. Kakashi shivered silently as he recalled, he's right. I saw Minato Sensei trying to finish step 4 once, it didn't end well. He'll find a way to use it safely, he has too, Jiraiya sighed. He's gotten far stronger than I would thought possible, but he still has a ways to go before he's ready. What about Akatsuki and Otokagure? Tsunade replied from the front. Now that Naruto is back, I think both he and Sakura will be pushing to find their traitorous team mate. Akatsuki has already begun their campaign to capture the Biju. According to my sources, they've already captured 3 and are moving to capture the others, Jiraiya said after a brief pause. As for our old team mate and his apprentice, I got a report saying that they fought Sasori and his new partner at the Heaven and Earth Bridge, he said with a frustrated sigh and a shake of his head. In this story, Sasori did not die fighting Sakura and Chio as he did in canon. Instead, he met Kabuto at the bridge and met Orochimaru. Kakashi remarked, I thought those two were in field country right now? They're extremely fast, especially this Toby I've been hearing about, the Gamma. Sennin shrugged. It ended in a stalemate, causing both sides to withdraw, and now the 2 Akatsuki members are in field country. Jiraiya added, observing that he still had their attention. Orochimaru and Sasuke went into hiding afterwards and haven't been seen since. When I have more information I'll tell you, but I got nothing at the moment. Naruto and Sakura won't like this, Tsunade whispered, closing her eyes. How did you make Naruto that strong anyway? Kakashi asked inquisitively as he turned to face his sensei's sensei. I gave him a choice. It was right after he got that sword of his. I asked him if he wanted to be trained as a Jinchuriki or as a sage. He picked the latter, the Gamma. Sennin said with a sudden smile. Speaking of that sword, it doesn't look like any weapon I've ever seen. I'm surprised that you introduced him to Kenjutsu, Kakashi said, raising an eyebrow. I didn't, confused, Kakashi said, excuse me? I didn't teach him Kenjutsu and he didn't learn it from anyone, Jiraiya said. He did it all himself. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. He taught himself Kenjutsu? I didn't say that, the Gamma, Sennin said, leaving the other two perplexed and uneasy. Tsunade questioned, then what do you mean? The only thing I taught him was chakra and elemental manipulation. I got the Toad Elders to train him in the Sage Arts and he completed it even after encountering a significant problem in it. I only taught him 2 jutsus. Futon, Daitopa and Bunshin Deibakuha. The rest he created himself, but as for the Kenjutsu, he's been relearning it from memory or at least subconsciously, Jiraiya explained. This made both of them extremely anxious. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and said, relearning Kenjutsu. But when did he learn it to begin with and how come I wasn't informed? Tsunade was essentially the same, but she had a sneaking suspicion that what she was going to hear was extremely significant. Jiraiya? She asked herself. I've done quite a bit of research on that sword of his. The Master Sword it's called, the Gamma. Sennin said, closing his eyes. His voice had become hollow, also known as the Blade of Evil's Bane. Wielded by a chosen hero at the dawn of a new era when the fate of the world is decided in a single moment. Kakashi questioned incredulously, wait, are you saying Naruto is some kind of savoir? Believe what you want, but that boy has already started on his path along with 2 others who hold other parts of a great power called the Triforce. Created by 3 goddesses at the dawn of the first age. If you want proof, then just look at the scar on his right hand. Jiraiya laughed. What makes it even more interesting is that he's the only student I know is still alive and by default he would be the destined child of the Toad. Sage prophecy. Now what are you talking about? Kakashi asked, shaking his head. With a little gasp, Tsunade gestured hesitantly at her old teammate, saying, that's impossible. I didn't believe it back then and I won't believe it now. Hating being left in the dark, the copy.nin asked her, what is it? A little under 20 years ago Jiraiya came back from his training under Old High Sage Toad Lord on Myobokuzen Mountain. When he got back he told Sarutobi Sensei and I that he was given a prophecy from the old Toad, Tsunade grumbled. Jiraiya laughed as he continued. The prophecy said I would train a student who would bring peace to the world, by salvation or destruction. Since I've only ever had 7 students. 3 Omegakure War Orphans, my old Genin team when I was a jounin instructor in Naruto. I'll give you one guess which one I know is still alive. His face was filled with smugness. The neutral Kakashi asked, and you're expecting us to believe this? Believe whatever you want, but he's already doing it. With Konoha, Suna, and Kumo on his side, the others will fall in line soon enough. He's uniting the world one country at a time, the Gamma. Sennin simply shrugged. By this point, Jiraiya was grinning broadly. Really, how do you respond to something like that? Speechless, huh? Jiraiya laughed, and guess what? That girl from Kumo. She also has a Triforce scar on her right hand, or did you miss that little detail? Both of them were looking at him in shock. You can't be serious, Jiraiya, they said. His smile was just wider. Namikaze Naruto and Ni Yugito are the current incarnations of the Hero of Time and the Princess of Destiny. Welcome to the Legend of Zelda and the Tale of the Gutsy Ninja. How ironic.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.